We ask everybody to kindly find your seats, please. The program will start in approximately 5 minutes. There's a lot of chairs up in the front. Please come up and find a seat. Thank you very much. We ask everybody to please find your seats. There's seats up here in the front. The program will begin momentarily in approximately 2 minutes. There are still seats up here in the front. People could come up here and find your seats. They'll be more comfortable. I was also asked by the technicians to ask everybody to please put your phones on either silent or close them altogether. Baruch Hashem, we have a program here that I hope will be very inspiring for everybody, and you don't want to get disturbed by your phones. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight and joining us, friends and family, everybody here locally, people that flew in especially, people that are watching from all over the world, in Australia. But we're here for the Siyum HaShloshim of our father, Rabbi Michal ben Aaron Leib. And it's the day after Chav Beis Shvat, Chav Gimel Shvat. We all know that the phrase, the pasuk of Hachai Yitein El Libai, became a household pasuk since Chav Beis Shvat, especially by us. And our Shloshim, actually, the last full day of Shloshim was Chav Beis Shvat. So I just want to chazer over what the Rebbe said. He said then, Tavshem Memches, Asenoitik Zach Avas Yisrael, that in those times, and especially today, the world needs Avas Yisrael. And everybody should take it to heart, V'hachai Yitein El Libai. And the Rebbe said then that the Rebbe's name was Chaya, so it's especially appropriate. And we could say today also that our father's name was Yechiel, also Yechi, Chai. We're here today, all of us, to be inspired by the life, by the lessons that we saw from our father, and what everybody, most of the people here in this room actually saw and experienced from our father. And we hope that you will take it with you and you will be inspired, and it'll be true. V'achai yitein el libai. So the truth is that we have a long program here. I mean, long, but a full program, I should say. And we have a siyum coming up at the end. We have a special video, so you don't want to miss any of it. We also have family, friends, cousins, all different types of people that are going to come up here and share some experiences and inspiration with us. But I could tell you, and I'm sure, that if my father was sitting next to you right now, he would probably elbow you, and with the back of his hand, tell you quietly, aber der Iker is Zainish kein Schwanz. And depending who you are, the word may be different. But he would apologize if it was something that's not appropriate, which usually wouldn't be the case. Everybody knows, not everybody knows, but we do know that, especially I could tell you that I never really saw my father as growing up. He was not usually in the house during the week. He was hard-working person, like everybody knows. But in the past few years, in the later years, we would see him more often in the house. And he would be sitting by the table saying brachas and berachas HaTorah. And he would mention to us that the Mishnah of Elu Dvarim, he appreciates it very much. It's something that talks to him. Particularly if you look at it, we know we say it every single day. Elu Dvarim Shein Lam Shir. And then there's specific ones that it says, if I could find it, so I could say it properly. Elu dvarim sha'adam eichel perisayim ba'olam hazeh. Now the Mishnah says it a little differently. V'akeren kayemes le'olam haba ve'elu hein kibuda ve'eim u'gemilas chasadim. And it says in the Mishnah, we say it in the Siddur Achnas. So just to mention those few, those who knew my father knew that he excelled in those things, with kibbut of aim and being devoted to his parents, and he didn't really have a father to be devoted to later, but to his brothers, which I think was part of his devotion to his father, was to be a father to his brothers. And of course, everybody's known, Baruch Hashem, my mother, Sozi Zangazut and Stark, they're known for their Hachnasas Archim and their Gemelas Chasadim. But it says, Pereisehem ba'olam hazeh. So everybody knows, of course, Sha'adam echel pereisehem ba'olam hazeh. Of course, everybody knows that he had a fruit store. So that was so he could appreciate that. But we learn that what does that mean? That a person eats pereisehem ba'olam hazeh, that the benefit of doing those mitzvahs is something that you could see in this world. You don't have to wait for the keren kayemes le'olam haba. You actually could see how the person that you helped, or your kibbut of aim, or whatever it is, you see the benefit right away. You see how you helped that other person. And that is something that he said in his own words, and it's on video. He's actually saying it when he was going to a simcha once, like when he was in the rehab in Borough Park, and one of my nephews took a video. And we have a clip of him saying how he appreciates this Mishnah. We know that Tishrei was a time that at my parents' house there wasn't really any room. No beds were definitely available. We had cousins, friends of cousins, cousins of friends, anybody that in the future might be our cousin, stayed in our house, Baruch Hashem, and it should continue by all of us. Particularly, now there was one family that, when I remember as a kid, they would come, their children, it started with their parents, when their parents were in Kfutza. Now at that time, this family was not related to us, but later my mother made sure to find some way that they should be related to us. It started off with a Moshe Lippe Rabinovich, and then his brothers came to Kfutza, and then they became B'nai Bayis in the house, and all the way to their children. And I remember particularly, every single Tishrei, they would come, and it was like they were my brothers. So we'd like to now, from Kansiva Hashem Esabracha, direct our attention to the screens for a special message from Yerushalayim Eir HaKodesh, from somebody who is actually now a mechutin to us. I'm sorry, but we are going to stop that because I did not see that the Rav was here. I would like to ask everybody to please give your attention to somebody that my father would always speak about, his legendary Mumasara. And we are privileged today to have with us somebody who is a grandchild of Mumasara, but also somebody who's the Rav here, the Mara da Astra, and somebody who my father was very dear of, the Rav Harav Azaba Shlita. So please come and share a few words.
In einer Saat zusammenkommt, man will reden, Wörter, der Covid, der Michal, oder der Shalom. Aber dem Reden darf man reden, versteht sich in der ersten Weg, weil nicht jede Sache kann man sagen, ob sie nicht viel Emes. Weil man redet auch Wege in eine Schaume, wissen Elam Emes. Mit Mela, die wir davon reden, oder Poches, die wir willen lernen, wollen sagen nur Sachen, die verbunden mit Emes. Michal, jede Jid hat in sich 3 Funktions. Teire, Aveda, Gemilas Chasodim. Man wird sich nur abstellen auf Gemilas Chasodim, weil das ist eine Mitzvah, was setzt sich an bei den Menschen. Aveda ist mehr private zwischen ihm und dem Eibestehen. Versteht sich? Ein Teure kann nicht sein in dieser Weg. Aber Gemilas Chasodim und befragt, a wichtige Chele für Bris Chasodim ist Achnos Orchem. Ich will reden wegen Achnos Orchem, weil befragt in heintige Zusammenkunft von der Michal oder Sholem, was alle wissen, als ist gewähnt mamisch a Ausnahme in dem Minion. Ich will nur rausbringen die Wichtigkeit von das Orchem mit dem Meister. Es wird einmal ein Meister von einem Mensch, ein Jid, versteht sich, wo sie gehabt hat, Kretschmer. Kretschmer meint, dass die Jologe Jiden, der Panos ist gewähnt, anstatt die Light geht mir in den Augen. Ja, please, the light. Okay, no. Amalige Zeiten ist gewähnt, die Seder, also der Mensch darf haben Panossa, ich möchte haben als ein Kretschmer, das heißt a Tavern auf Englisch, ein Motel, und fragt kommen jeden, und die haben gedacht, vorhin auf Panossa, doch auf solche Sachen, und sind eingestanden, um sie geben Essen und zu schlafen. Ich komme der Mensch von Kretschmer zu Ramea Pramschlana, a Pelische Rebbe. Und hat gefragt, der Schatzscheiler. Arbeitet in dem Kretschmer seit Jahren, ist ihm schwer zu da mit der Minion, und alle Dachen, was wir da haben, am Minion, Kaddish, Kedusha, Borcho, Trisateira, sei gebunden mit der morgen Zeiten zu traveling, zu gehen, vorne von einem Ort zum zweiten Ort, das gewähnt mit Schwierigkeiten. Menschen, sie werden Orem. Fragte, was kann ich kommen am Meiler, was wir können weisen? Nicht, ich kann da mit den Minion, Kedusha, Boche, Kaddish, Kriasatera, alles was wir da haben. Hat Rameim geämpft, als dein Achnos Orchem weckt über Teire und Mitzvahs, Teire in Aveda. Und hat ihm gesagt, der Posek in Teire. Ich kann nicht, entschuldigt, ja. The light is in my eyes, I can't tolerate it. Hat gesagt, steht in Posek, bei Yitzhak gewinnt, bei Yitzhak Lusur, Basodel Eiserf. So die Gemorra, ein Sicher Ella Tfila. Gegangen davnen, Basodel, Leis Erev, sagt der Pshat, als kommen nont in Ovent, nont zu Bis Mashiach. Weil ja, Yitzhak, und gesagt, was wird sein? Das heißt, hat gefragt, das hat mehr gesagt, Pschatten Posik, als bei Jisse einer auf Yitzhak hat aufgehoben die Augen, wie hin die gemahlenen Bäume. Hat eingeteilt den Posik, als Yitzhak auf Vino hat Mispal gewähnt, Leis was wird sein, wenn es wird sein, kommen nannte zu Bis HaMashiach. Das ist endlich in dem Goles, hat aufgehoben dem Augen und gesagt, in den gemahlen Bäumen. Gemahlen derselbe Geistes von Gemilas Chasodim. Das heißt, Rameh hat geämpft der Yeshuvnik, soll wissen, dass das für die Gis jeden zu essen und zu schlafen, hat es Azar Koyach, also kann Machria sein, a Philo überwegen, die andere, was haben in sich Teure war wieder. Und bringt der Reihe, das wissen alle, als warum Vino, alle wissen, als Gedacht haben Orchim, hat die gebeten, entschuldigt zu dem Eibestehen, darf nehmen von dem sie mit dem Melochim. Von dem bringt die Gemara Reihe, als Gedeilach Nosses Orchim Jesem Mekabos nicht Schinner. Mir versteht sich, dein Aber, was du tust, das ist weckt über in Machria, in das dein Schuss. Es ist im Meile derselbe Sache mit dem Heindeke, der Michal, was man redet wegen dem, was gewähnt, der macht es Eurech Mamisch auf die Gräste von ihm, und die Ike, was ich gewähnt besimcha. Das Seve Poem Joffes. Wie viele Menschen sie gewähnt, zu Jahr gewähnt, Ort wird zu schlafen, das weiß nicht genau, die Protein, bestell so vor, als sie haben gehabt, die erste, sie haben gerechnet sich für die erste Klasse. Später, gefühlt wird zu schlafen, die Kinder in der Sprache. Es ist Meile, aber mit der Eintrachten, wegen der Michal, oder Shalom, was durchgegangen erleben, was entlaufen, gerade wird von der russischen Regierung, in der Medina, was hat reingeschleppt ein bisschen in dem Koch, in dem Kultur, wie man sagt, in russische Leben. Und hat gewollt entleben von dort. Und Baruch Hashem, ist raus von dort, gekommen in Frankreich, ich bin einig, oder Israel, und in Amerika, hat gewähnt, der was hat ausgehalten im ganzen Mischproche. Kommen vier Brüder und eine Mama, und er wird die Tate nicht gewähnt. Und hat gewähnt die Ältere, und ich hatte viele keine Möglichkeit zu gehen nach Yeshiva. Wie Meile kommt doch raus, als sein ganzes Leben ist gewähnt, zu geben, das Orchim, helfen seinem Mischproche, geben sie, wie sie darf. Was kann sein, der größte Geben und Chesed von der Sassot Neshama? Versteht sich, als der Eishes Chayil kommt als Sachkredit. Die Gemara sagt in Teines, Rachom sind gekommen zu zwei, das heißt, das geht am meisten wegen, es ist gefährdet, sie das Akshomim, sie sagen, bei maulige Zeiten, es gewähnt, es verhalten sich Akshomim, haben gemacht, Tanesim, und so weiter, aber sie gewähnt dort ein Zadig, ich meine, wenn diese dachte ich mir, wo die Rachom haben sie gekommen zu ihm und gebeten, soll bespallen sein auf Akshomim. Versteht sich, kommen, sagt, ich darf gehen, oben, weil nicht gewollt mehr sehen, was tut, geht mir Spall sein. Und die Frau ist gegangen oben. Und sie haben gebeten. Gleich wie sie haben sie beten, ist angefangen, die Wolken zu kommen. Aber interessant, der Mann hat gebeten, von einer Seite gestanden und gebeten am Eibestehen, und die zweite Seite kommt, wo die Frau gestanden gebeten. Die Wolken haben angefangen zu kommen von der Seite von der Frau. Freude die Gemara, was ist das? Hat die gesagt, weil das, was auf Freude geht, das ist Hanoset, das heißt Noset Kreuver. Das heißt, sie darf geben zugreifen, das wir haben Essen zu trinken. Das ist die größte Mitzvah. Versteht sich als, beide haben Chelken darauf, aber sie gibt eine gewisse Reichkeit und eine gewisse Jaschkoya, wie man sagt. Und das wird so, Eishes Chayil soll sein übergegeben. Also ich viel einmal mehr wie dem was ist. Ich will nur sagen, als solche in der Mischproche ist gewesen, was ich habe gehört, Grimra Yeshua, eine von den Seides, was mir sagt, hat der Friedrich Rebbe hat auf ihm gesagt, der wisse, wie man sagt, die Beine von Tanja. Also wie der, was gelernt Tanja, und weiß, was meint der Badrege von den Beinen, ist, kann sich vorstellen, was das Badrege ist, Meile versteht sich, hat die Kinder, die Besprocher, die alle, haben ein Stickel, wie gesagt, ein Spor von ihm, und das geht so, in das, was sie sehen, geben und chesed. Die Ike, erweide, was sie da, in Midas Tevis. Ich will nur sagen, noch ein Wort, von Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov hat gesagt, man weiß, dass Baal Shem Tov hat Michal gewähnt an Nosche Pschute. Viele, was haben nicht kennenlernen, gehabt nicht in der Morgelzeit, also gewähnt, ich sehe, wie man sagt, eine strenge und angezogene Matze, Porsche Begashmies. Porsche nicht gewähnt, was zu essen. Wenn bedeutig, hat eingepflanzt, als jeden, die an Noschen Pschute, das, was sie sagt, Amen, Heshmirabba, und sie sagt, Amen mit der Kavona, ist der größte Haspor, was kann sein, durch sehr Weide. Der Weide von so Amen, Heshmirabba, und der Weide von Kaddish. Und mit die ganze Tmimis, und hat auch geteitscht. Der Baal Shem Tov hat auch geteitscht in der Posek, Atu Yeshiv Til Israel, Atu Kodesh Yeshiv Til Israel, a de Kedusha, das heißt, das, was kommt, der Haspor, von Himmel, aber durch Tilis Israel. Das, wie jeden sagen, Amen, Heshmirabba, das sehr weit, die alle Unionen von Kedusha, das bringt, das ist Maschpia, aber die Ewigste soll Maschpia sein, gute Sachen, quasi so, Panossa, Begashmies. Und so da ein interessanter Pshat von dem Reben, in dem Ingen, das ich sehe das, aber gar nicht weiter sein drauf, aber Kitz ist, als wir wissen doch, ich kann nicht reingehen in den für das Zimtzum, aber es kommt erst, die wir sagen, gleich sieht es, als der Ewigste, Ede beschaffende Welt, ist gewonnen, das Zimtzum mit zugenommener Lichtigkeit und es geblieben der Moor, Atmes allein. Der Baal Shem gesagt, als die Jiden, die an Nosche Pschute, wo sie sagen und sie reden, sagen, Baruch Hashem auf jede Sache, so wie wenn Michal, gedankt auf jede Sache, was er bekommen von dem Eibestellen, müsst haben gedankt, jeden Tag, für jede Sache, was er hat getan. Einmal brennt sich in der Sefer, einmal gesagt in der Siddur, als ein Kind, vielleicht gucken in Siddur, ich weiß, meistens, der zählt in der Meise bekostet er hat. Was wenn der Meise bekostet er hat? Er hat auch gedankt, dem Eibestellen auf jede Ewe, was er hat. Menschen in heutige Zeiten, die take advantage, verstehen nicht. Baruch Hashem, wir können gehen, wir können tanzen, wir können tragen, arbeiten. Der Chossid ist gewähnt, was hat auch gedankt, dem Ewigen auf jeder Tritt und Tritt. Koam Neshama Tal Yudko. Es ist Meile, das hat der Baal Shem Tov da aufgetun, als das, was Jid sagt mit der Geschmack, mit der Warmkeit, je Amen, je Heshmirabba zu Amen, mit der Emesse Tmimes, ist Mamschach, wie ich sehe, das ruft sich Atzmes. Aber die Spose kommen mit dem Eibischen allein. Und das können wir ablernen. Die Ehrlichkeit und die Ehrlichkeit und die Frömmkeit und die Gutskeit von der Michal, oder Shalom, und wir haben den Chaim Lechaim, der ist Chayil, wo sie gewähnt ein Schutev, ein Partner, der größte Teil, die alle Mitzvahs hat getan. Aber man darf gedenken, als der Ingen von dem Chesed, sein Ingen von Chesed, ist Mamschich, also wie der Baal Shem gesagt, alle Schuheis, in Schuheis und Panosse, Begashmis. Jetzt kommt der Geist, und man darf gedenken der Minion, und als wie man sagt noch einmal, als Bebet, als der Michal oder der Shalom, so sein am Meiles Jösche auf dem Heschel Chayil seine und auf die Mischpoche, auf die Kinder und die Kindskinder und die Einiglach und alle anderen Mischpoche, als sie sollen auswachsen. Ehrliche Jeden, gesunde Mischpoches, aber kennen, Schir mit Kumi, können sagen, du Gedulam Shigedalti.
Wir danken der Rob für Verkommen speziell daheim bei Nacht zu begrüßen die Eulam und für die Varem Beverter. From Kansiva Hashem es Abracha, we go to Yerushalayim Mircha Berachamim Tashuv. We'll now direct ourselves back to the video screens, where we have a special greeting from Jerusalem, from Harav Shmuel Rabinovich, the Rav of the Kaisel and the Mekaymes HaKadoshim.
דניה וכל המשפחה, מכובדיי כולם. מן הראוי היה שאני אהיה אצלכם, שאני אבוא פיזית, לנחם אתכם, להתאבל יחד איתכם על פטירת האבא, ראש המשפחה, רב מיכל עליו השלום. אבל גם אם אני רחוק פיזית, אני נמצא כאן ליד הכותל המערבי, הלב אצלכם. אני בוכה איתכם ואני מצטער איתכם. איך אפשר להספיד אדם כמו רב מיכל? איך אפשר להתחיל ולטהר את גדלות הנפש שלו, את רחבות הדעת שלו, את הלב הענק והפתוח שלו? הגמרא במסכת נדרים אומרת, היזהרו מבני עניים, שמהם תצא חוכמה. יש הרבה סוגים של עוני. יש עוני כלכלי, יש עוני נפשי, יש עוני רוחני. רב מיכל עליו השלום הגיע מעולם של עוני. אי אפשר לתאר את המשמעות של ילדות בעולם קומוניסטי. תרבות שלמה שגזרה עוני רוחני על העם היהודי. עולם ללא הריבונו של עולם, ללא הקדוש ברוך הוא. עולם ללא אמונה, עולם ללא מסורת. תרבות שנשבעה להחריב את העולם הישן וליצור עולם חדש. והיא יצרה בצוהר גדול בעולם. בתוך הכלא הזה חיה משפחה חופשית, משפחה בת חורין, משפחת הרב החסיד רב אהרון לייבליין, השם ייקום דמו, אבא של רב מיכאל עליו השלום. המשפחה הזאת, כמו מוישה רבינו, רואה את מה שאף אחד לא רואה. ויפן כה וכה, וירא כי אין איש. היא לא רק רואה אנשים, היא לא מפחדת מדברים חלפים, היא רק רואה את הקדוש ברוך הוא. משפחת רסקין לא הרכינה את ראשה. רוח החירות היהודית הייתה חזקה יותר מהכבלים הקומוניסטיים. רב מיכל הצליח לברוח לפריז ועבר ממלחמת שמד אחת למלחמת שמד אחרת. בשיחות שלי עם רב מיכל עליו השלום על התקופה הזאת תמיד השתוממתי. איך עומד בחור יהודי צעיר לבדו מול כל האתגרים האדירים של העולם המערבי. כמה סכנות, כמה פיתויים, כמה קשה לו להשתתף בזרם. להיות אחד מכולם, זה דבר הכי קל. על יוסף הצדיק עליו השלום אומרים חז"ל שדמות דיוקנו של אביו נגלתה לו ושמרה אותו מן החטא. רב מיכל עליו השלום ראה כל הזמן את דמות הדיוקנות של כל אבותיו הקדושים. הוא הלך שם לבדו עם כל העוצמה היהודית. איזו עוצמה יהודית הייתה בבחור הצעיר הזה. איזה מסירות נפש. הרבה אנשים נשרו בדרך, אבל רב מיכל המשיך בדרך היהדות, ולא סר מן הדרך ימין ושמאל. כשרב מיכל הגיע בחסדי השם לארצות הברית, וזכה להתחתן עם דניה, שתיבדל לחיים טובים. להקים איתה בית נאמן בישראל, ולפתוח את החנות שבה זכה להעלות פירות וירקות על שולחנו של הרבי. אז מתחיל הפרק השלישי, פרק שכולו פלאי פלאים. הוא תמיד סיפר לי שהיסודות בחתונה, כשהרבי משתתף שם, כשהם מקבלים על עצמם את כל מנהגי החסידות, למרות הקשיים והפיתויים. במדרש נאמר, אמר רבא באו, אוהל של אברהם אבינו מפולש היה. מה פירוש מפולש? אוהל שפתוח לכל הצדדים, לכל רוחות השמיים. רב מיכל ותיבדל לחיים טובים אמן דניה בדורנו, הם כמו אברהם אבינו בדורו. אין מי שהגיע במשך עשרות שנים לקרון העץ, ולא הכיר את הכנסת אורחים של רב מיכל. כל מה שלמדנו מאברהם אבינו, הם קיימו בעצמם בהידור. קשה להאמין, בית שפתוח לאורחים בכל יום ימות השנה, בכל שעה משעות היממה. בית שבמקום מקרר ביתי יש לו מקררים תעשייתיים, כדי שאף פעם לא יחסר אוכל להגיש לאורחים. בית שפתוח לכל, לעשיר ולדל, וכל אורח מקבל בו את אותה הארת פנים. לא משנה מיהו ולא משנה מהו. אותה הכנסת אורחים מופלאה, כאילו שהאורח הוא שעושה טובה למארחים, ולא להפך. בית שגם כשהמשפחה יוצאת לחופשה, נותר פתוח למען אורחים שיבואו. בית שמה שמשפחה רגילה מבשלת לשנה, הם מבשלים לשבוע. בית משפחת רסקין, הבית שהקימו רב מיכל עליו השלום, ומרת דניה תיבדל לחיים ארוכים, היה בית מלא שמחה. שמחה של הכרת הטוב, שמחה של מצווה, שמחה של דבקות ברבה, שמחה של חייב אדם לברך על הרעה כשם שמברך על הטובה. רק בזמן אחד יכלו לראות נימה של צער על פניו של רב מיכל היקר, בשעה ששולחן השבת לא היה מלא מספיק. אם חלילה נותרו כיסאות ריקים ולא נמצאו מספיק אורחים להסב סביב השולחן. דניה היקרה, שתזכה לבריאות שלמה, עליה יאמרו דברי רבי עקיבא, שלי ושלכם שלה הוא. היא הייתה שותפה נאמנה של רב מיכל, תמיד בנועם הליכות, במאור פנים, בחוכמה בלתי רגילה, לומר את המילה הנכונה בכל מקום. ואתם הילדים היקרים, אריק, גוטל, משי, אבריימי, זלדי ושולם, וכל המשפחה שלכם, הייתם החיילים של אבא ואמא. בחגים פיניתם את החדרים שלכם כדי שיהיה מקום להעלין עוד כמה אורחים הבית. ביצעתם עבור אבא שליחויות משליחויות שונות. אבא שלי שליטה סיפר לי איך שהגיע כנער יתום לארצות הברית. רב מיכל היה שולח את גוטל לחפש אותו ולקרוא לו לבוא לסעוד על שולחנכם. זכיתם לקבל את השיעור החשוב ביותר בעולם של הכנסת אורחים, וברוך השם זכיתם להקים בתים של הכנסת אורחים ולהמשיך את תורתו ואת דרכו של אבא. אני זוכר את עצמי מתארח שם כבחור ומקבל יחס שכל אדם היה רוצה לקבל אותו. זה לא סוד שאני מתקשה לשתות משקה. היו רבים שכל הזמן רצו להשקות אותי ולא ידעתי איך לצאת מזה. רב מיכל הוא שהיה מגן עליי מפני זה, לא מפני שהוא לא הבין בחשיבות או המשמעות של חסידות כששותים משקה, אבל זה היה מפני הכנסת אורחים שלו. כל מי שהתארח בשולחן השבת של משפחת רסקין לא ישכח את החוויה. שולחן ערוך של סועדים, אין זמנים, אין תוכניות, כל דכפין ייתה ויכול. כל אורח מגיע בזמן אחר, בשעה אחרת, וכולם מתקבלים באותה שמחה, באותו מאור פנים, באותו כבוד, כאילו כל הערב חיכו רק לו כדי שהוא ייכנס. מתוקף תפקידי זכיתי להתארח אצל אנשים רבים ברחבי העולם. מעודי לא ראיתי אדם כמו רב מיכל ותיבדל לחיים טובים דניה. לא היה נושא שלא יכלת לשוחח איתם, ולמרות הכל, רב מיכל היה ענב שבענבים, לא גבה ליבו ולא ירומו עיניו, איש ישר דרך, פועל אמס שהוא פעולתו אמת. רב מיכל עבר את כל טלטלות החיים, ברגעים משמחים וברגעים הקשים. בכולם הוא נותר נאמן לקדוש ברוך הוא, נאמן לתורה הקדושה, נאמן לרבי. לא כן עבדי משה, אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא, בכל ביתי נאמנו. כאן מירושלים, ממקום המקדש, מהכותל המערבי, אני מצטרף לדמעותיכם ומוריד דמעות, כדי שיהיו בגנזיו של הקדוש ברוך הוא, והצטרפו לאותן דמעות של כל בית ישראל על חורבן ירושלים ועל הבקשה לגאולה. רב מיכל שלנו, אתה מכניס האורחים הגדול, סמל והשראה של כולנו. עכשיו הקדוש ברוך הוא ואברהם אבינו מכניסים אותך לבית שלהם, לעולם הגדול של גן עדן. שם אתה בקרבת הצדיקים. תהי נשמתך צרורה בצרור החיים ותהיה מליץ יושר על דניה, על הילדים, על הנכדים, על הנינים, על כל המשפחה. ומחה השם דמעה מעל כל פנים, ונזכה במהרה לגאולה שלמה. אמן ואמן.
תודה רבה לכבוד הרב שליטה, יאריך ימים ממלכתו. Now we move along with the program, and we'd like to remind everybody that there's going to be a siyum of the Mishnayos later on the program, and we thank everybody who participated and learned Mishnayos. Lulei Nishmas, our father. On Yud Beis Cheshvan Tafresh Tzadik, a baby was born to Rabbi Aaron Leib and Dabareza Lane in Leningrad. 13 years later, the Sefer Hayom Yom came out. After this boy's bar mitzvah, and after this boy's father got killed in Leningrad, Arzeda Rabbi Aaron Leib Lane. And in that Hayom Yom on Yud Beis Cheshvan, the Rebbe writes, Achas Materis Harishonos Shel Rabbeinu Hazaken, v'nikru oz b'shem Werter, Shema Yisrael, Ayid der Hert, Havaya Elekeinu, as Keichenu v'chayesenu, is das Lamaila min hateva, un Havaya Echad. Loosely translated, one of the Alter Rebbe's early teachings, then called Werter, short sayings, is Shema Yisrael. A Jew senses that Havaya Elekeinu, our strength and life, is beyond nature, and Havaya Echad, Hashem is one. Our father would constantly say that he has no idea how he ended up where he was, that everything he went through was just nissim neflois, and he has no idea how he ended up where he is today, whether it was growing up during the war or later on when they were traveling through Russia to Lvov, through the border in Paris, helping his mother, helping her raise his little brothers. He doesn't know how he came to America. He has no idea what would happen. And he would always say, thanking God for them, and it's all not him, it's all sus obvious, it has to be. He has no idea how it happened, and we see how the Hayom Yom tells us exactly that. A few days ago, we had a bris, Baruch Hashem. There's a new baby, Michal Raskin. And while my father was in NYU, just after he had his recent episode, and he was actually on his road to recovery, he was getting better, he was very upset that he wasn't able to participate in person in the bris of our baby 4 months ago. And my nephew, Levi Raskin from RSF, who flew in specially for the bris, came and he spent the day with my father in the hospital during the bris and tried to make his day a little happier with the simcha right before he was being moved to Lakewood. So I would like to ask everybody to please give your attention to the Bechar of my father's Bechar, the father of Michal Raskin, Rabbi Levi Raskin of RSF, California.
My dear father, Sheyechyan, never said no to his father. So in that spirit, I stand here today. And I want to wish him and the whole family long health and happiness together with my dear Safta till 120 plus tax. 80 years ago, on Yud Shvat, my dear Zayda's father was nifter in Leningrad. He was only 12 years old. When he spoke about his father, he spoke about it like it happened 5 years ago. Very fresh, very real. It was like 3D. There were tears, there was joys. It was very alive. And to me, as grandchildren, which he always told me, my b'chor's b'chor, because he was a b'chor, his biggest legacy, without him even saying it, was a lesson on Kibbud Avim. We just heard that Seretz Adibris on Shabbos. He didn't say it, he actually did it. It was really, really amazing. He had this special gift of doing, but he also asked a lot from us, but he never asked anything he wouldn't do. So when the song goes in fire and Wasser, in fire and water, he literally did it every single day. So as dear grandchildren and family, it's very, very hard to even try to have the kibbud av that he had. But at least we can try. He didn't do it for awards. If you want to know where all his awards are, on the 3rd floor in the attic, they're there. He didn't do it for a yeshakayach. He did it just because that's what you got to do. He had a tremendous, tremendous understanding to do things without even being told. But he didn't mind telling us. And we're very honored and happy that we could try to keep that message. So like my father always liked to say, to remind us what the Rebbe said, Mazare b'chaim, afhu b'chaim, if the descendants are alive, so too we are alive. If I may say, Mazare b'chaim, if we live like he is alive, then he's alive with us. My Zayda lived like his father's alive. When he told us that his father put us on a shelf and he cried, Misha, Michal, would you have a beard? He said it with more emotions and tears than my child yesterday. He really, really felt it. He understood it, and he made us feel it as well. And I think by us keeping that message alive in our family, it's something that's a legacy that no money, no fame can do. His relationship was a very personal one with everyone. As grandchildren, he always used to say, Banim knei banim mamish, you're just like my children. But he was very kind. He used to say, Abdus gewen my zun, gewen da zafras. He was very gentle. He was very nice. This is something unique. It's hard for you to believe. He used to shake my hand very gently. He just loved me. He just was nice and kind. Always let the blood go down to my fingers. He said it's my mother's side. But it was very, very, very famous. Handshake, but I got the famous hug. As much as he loved and understood, he also pushed us to go more and bigger. He was our biggest fan, literally a big fan. You say, Nu Leivik, wo ist dein MTC? And I told him, it cost a lot this. Money did not scare him at all. Like my dear grandmother used to say, money by her slips off her hands. She says, my friends put it in the mattress. I put it on the table. It was meant to spend. It was meant to enjoy. And he used to tell me that you just have to think big. And he was my fundraising coach. He says, mach gute essen. Good food, no fake soup. No, but he really meant is don't be fake at all. And he used to tell me to tell the donors in our Chabad house, you survived the Holocaust. You made it to America. You have alle gute Sachen. What are you going to have left? Okay, noch 10 million. But the fact, what are you going to have left? And he meant it. If he had 10 million, he would put it out of his pocket and give it to me. He just wanted action. But he wanted us to think very big. Speaking about big, the Rebbe, which was his biggest motivator and inspirer, which he called the boss. He said, the boss told me, the Rebbe always pushed him. He told me, he says, Levi, listen up. If it wasn't for the boss, I would be living in Long Island, and your tata would be a lawyer. So we're in the fruits business. No, he basically listened. He knew what a boss is, because he was a good one. And he listened to Rebbe as a boss. He was fully, fully devoted, ibigegeben, in a Pnimi style. It's not too in style these days. He listened without the show, but with the action. The Rebbe said something, he did it. He's my boss. But the Rebbe wasn't only his boss, the Rebbe was his father. And I feel like Zayda was our father, but he was our boss as well, always guiding and giving and telling till the last second. We really expect him to live forever, and he is here with us. Just a small anecdote. We were very zeicha, we're very merited to have him and my dear Safta to come visit us many times at our shlichus. And he was driving once in the suburb of Diego, California, and he tells me, listen up. When I was in Russia, you telling me I'm going to leave Russia was as you telling me Mashiach is coming. Maybe even Mashiach coming was more possible. He never imagined leaving. So the Gukumins America, Mashiach came. Said, if you told me in Russia that my grandson is going to be here, I'm going to be on Shlichus, I'm going to come visit you in California amid the palm trees, that's Gan Eden. So I'm happy that we could try to bring heaven here to earth, and hopefully he could be with us and we could keep the Gan Eden alive. Just to share a short story of his cute personality. So he's in shul, and this fellow there that his father died at 8 years old, it was just his father's 50th yahrzeit, connected with my Zayda. I think maybe because they were both Yersaimim. And he always said, your grandfather is like my father. And he's sitting in shul, and in the good RSF spirit, they come home, they take off their suit, they put on jeans, and they come to shul. So he's sitting in shul, and my Zayda walks in, he's wearing jeans, and they were really good ones, they had holes in them. And he tells him, Ed, would you go speak to the president or the king with such a pants? So he looks up and he says, Mr. Raskin, they were $400. So he looks down, and a twinkle in his eyes, he says, you were ripped off. The next week on Friday, he calls me new. I hope it kommt mir a mensch. The next Friday, did he come with slacks? I want slacks. And literally, he taught people things that I can't do. And this fellow got closer and closer. Baruch Hashem, and when my Zayda was sick, he used to come put on tefillin, and he was very emotional because the connection was very, very real. So in closing, today in the Yom Yom it says, Meine Zokt. And I felt like Zayda felt like Meine, and he was very unique. We weren't only, not only his grandchildren were Meine, but his in-laws, everyone we married, he used to tell me, make sure you take care of my granddaughter. He met my wife. He really, really, he took the word of adoption to a whole different level. And like the saying goes, extraordinary things don't only happen by great people, it's by ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Zayda felt like he was a very simple man. A farmer, regular guy, Pashat Yid. Every time I spoke to him, I felt like I was learning Tanya. He used to tell me, ich bin a gar nicht. He used to tell me, I have a Yetzer Tov, it's so strong. He used to tell me about the Yetzer Tov, the Yetzer Hara. He used to tell me about Iskafia. He used to tell me that my davening is b'chlal not a davening. You call this a davening? At 92, he's having issues with his davening. Like really, always gearbeitet of sich, working himself. Never was fulfilled with himself. His grandparents were holy. He's a regular guy struggling. So like it says in Tanya, we could say halavai beinani. But I wish that my son, the namesake, which I never imagined that would happen, and our whole family should be a halavai like Michal Raskin Lane.
Thank you very much, Levi. And we'll just move along. First of all, I want to let everybody know that there will be special video presentations, more than one, so you should just know it's coming up. My father had a very deep love for all of his family, and his nephews and his nieces were no different. He had a nephew that many years ago joined the family from the Midwest, and my father admired him very much. My father knew that anytime he calls him, whatever he asks for, it'll get done. And he doesn't have to worry about it. And he enjoyed going to his mostis in Borough Park or in the camp in the summer. And I'd like to ask our cousin, Rabbi Yeshua Balkany, to please come and share with us some words of inspiration.
It's hard to believe that Michal is not with us. And yes, he gained in age, but his exuberance and his lifeless, beautiful expressions to each and every person he encountered was rare and remarkable in its distinction. I want to say to Danya, for many beautiful years, you set the standard of regality in your hostessing, your graciousness in your greeting, and your expressions to people in uplifting their own self-image and dignity. Anyone who has hosted out-of-towners, that's one category. But when somebody doesn't have, and they have to find themselves at a table, no matter how welcoming, there's a level of discomfort. Michal and Danya took away the entire category of discomfort. And I want to say to you, Shalom, when you mention the Mishnah, Elu Devarim, you should know that the Rambam paskins that of all the things enumerated in that Mishnah, Hachnosas Kala, Alavoyas Ames, all these things, the Rambam paskins that the greatest thing listed there is Lavoya, escorting. And the Meforshim on the Rambam explained why that? Why is that bigger than Halvoyas Ames? That a Kohen Gadol could close his Gemara and go out of the Beis HaMikdash for a Mace Mitzvah. How could that be? Lavoya be bigger? And they say because nothing on that list restores the self-confidence and the imagery that a person has to pick up his head and to have a thrust of goodwill to push him forward each and every day. But when somebody feeds someone, which in and of itself is unbelievable, but when they escort them or they deal with them with the approach of picking the person up, uplifting, there is nothing that could be kinder and more generous to an individual. So say the Meforshim on the Rambam, and that's why he lifts it. So I want to underscore for just a moment the fact that everyone, if you talk about Michal and you talk about Danya, we know that their house was open from morning to night from all types. But the level of that restoration of the human dignity, that's rare. At their level, people walked out of their house feeling uplifted. They felt choshev. They felt they were dealt with interest. Not that somebody asked them, how are you? And they were busy looking elsewhere and they couldn't care less what your answer was. They were truly interested and they wanted to hear the answer. And my shver, Zichrona Livrocha, I think everybody in this room knew my shver, who was snatched from us during this crazy COVID that the Chinese sent on us. he said to me in at least 5 or 6 different occasions that Michal on the head feared ois the kavana. Now, when I came into the family, I wasn't at that point aware that many used that term, fearing ois the kavana. Some used it for their own agenda of what they wanted to twist the words to be, to say that, well, that wasn't the real kavana. The real kavana was something else. But only on Michal, in 53 years, did I ever hear him say on any single person, and he said it, as I said, 5 or 6 times. And we all know that my shver could have been very cynical or sarcastic. And he was called the mayor of 14th Avenue. And he greeted people one after the other. Reb Shloshim, good morning, how are you? And the next one about this and about that. And he had the dynamics of being a leader within the realm of his community. The only one that I heard him say, feared ois the kavana, was on Michal. Because Michal, when he did something, there was no agenda. We are far from flawless. And when we meet someone, sometimes our anacle is in that person's class. It's someone that we're dealing with money. We have agendas. And whether we like it or not, we're susceptible to injecting the agenda into our conversation, how we greet someone, how we deal with someone. Michal had no agenda. When he spoke to someone, or he slipped him $500 to go buy clothing for Yom Tiv, it was with zero agenda. He wanted it for the essence, and that's why my shver talked about fearing ois the kavana. And that was the essence of Michal. And about uplifting the quality, Kadmonim said on the word gevir, when we say someone is a gevir, we allude to their wealthiness. It's talking about money. But Kadmonim didn't touch it like that. They called a gevir, a man with money, a gevir, from the lashon of gibor. Now, everyone knows that Michal could pick up a 100-pound potato sack and just throw it over his shoulders and walk as if it was a feather. But more importantly, he was the gibor that in any chesed that he did, it was manifest and drenched with the love for the person that he was helping. And anyone seated here who was at his burial in the cemetery could notice that there were a number of lahavdil goyim there, even Schwarze. And they were crying during the burial. Because when he did for them, because they needed something, like one of them said, he was my father. My father never did for me, my real father, what Mr. Raskin did for me. And the Gemara on a pasuk of this week's Sedra says, an interesting dramatic story about a world famous, it's quoted all over Shas, the Tanner Shel Achinoi, an oven, a stove. And there was a question that prompted a debate that shook the world between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, whether the taharos that was inside of that oven whether it was tahar or tameh. And Rabbi Eliezer held it was tahar, and that the kohanim could eat it and use it. And the Chachamim disagreed. So Rabbi Eliezer said, outside the Beis HaMedrash, there's a tree 400 years old. and it was as wide, like 6 feet wide, and its roots were as deep as could be. And he said to the Chachamim, if I am correct, let that tree take off like a bullet. And that second, the Gemara says, it uprooted and flew away, that big, heavy, heavy tree. And the Chachamim still didn't want to accept. So he said, look outside the window. Do you see that Emes Hamayim, that flow of water coming down the mountainside? Let it start flowing upwardly. And that should be the proof that Shemayim agrees with me. And immediately the water flow went up instead of down. And they still didn't accept. So he said, let there be a baskol, a heavenly voice, thunder and lightning, announcing to the world that it's tahar. And the Gemara says that immediately there was a heavenly voice, and the heavenly voice said, everywhere, Rabbi Eliezer Paskins, he's right. Why are you giving him such a hard time? And the Chachamim said, Torah lo bashamayim hi. We're not accepting the heavenly voice. And they turned and they went and took the taharos and they burnt it. So, and they asked Rabbi Eliezer, are you accepting our psak? And he said, no. So they put him into Cherem, and the Gemara all over Shas talks about Rabbi Eliezer, Shamutehi, that he's in Cherem. They put him into Cherem because he refused to accept. So the Yerushalmi asks on this Gemara and says, V'halo yoda Rabbi Eliezer sha'achrei rabim lahatos, a pasuk from this week's Sedra, that majority rules. To debate was no problem. There's always a vikuach, a shakal v'tarya to prove and to muster and to marshal support for one's point of view. But once we end the debate, then majority rules. And that's the question of the Yerushalmi. Why didn't he accept majority rule? And the Korban Eda at the bottom of the page answers and says, because Achrei Rabim Lahatos is a halacha in Dayonim. And a halacha in Dayonim, Rabbi Eliezer held there's a long list of requirements for a judge. When there's a din Torah, you can't have one litigant speak for 20 minutes and the other one just for 5. One standing and stating his claim and the other one sitting. It has to be equal time in every aspect. And Rabbi Eliezer held that they didn't have halacha of dayanim because they took the taharos and they burnt it befonov. And if they felt that it was still tamei and it had to be burnt, if they were decent, they should have at least waited till he left the Beis HaMedrash. But they burnt it befonov. It was like wiping his face in it, right in front of him. And therefore he held that he did not have to accept the majority rule. And that's a lesson in human communication and human feeling. In that respect, Michal was outstanding. I got a call from him once, 30, 40 years ago, and he had to take a trip. He was either going to Australia or he was going to Canada. He noticed that his passport was expired. It happened on 2 occasions. And he ran around, he said, here and there, and he couldn't get it. He paid somebody extra money. He went to Connecticut to a different office. He couldn't get the passport, and he was leaving the next day. So I called a senator, and I said, do me a special favor. Normally you would go to staff, but I said, this is an uncle, and he's very special to us, and I must have immediately that passport. So around 20 minutes later, I got a call, tell him to go straight to Manhattan. And he walked into a room that had at least, as he repeated to me, I was not there, 100 people. It was a jam-packed room. And when he got there, 5 minutes later, the clerk came out and said, "Is Mr. Michael Raskin here in the audience?" And he stood up and he went in, and 15 minutes later, he had the passport. He called me to his house when he got back from the trip, a month later, whenever it was. He wanted to drink a l'chaim. And we took a picture. That picture is the only picture in my bedroom amongst the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the older generation that's still standing there with me and Michal drinking that l'chaim. And when he said to me, as his way was, to take a situation and to make the most of it, and he said to me, "I just want you to know," of course, the issue was the passport. But when they came out and called my name, and I was the first one to go in, I felt like $1 million. Those were his words to me. I felt so happy that happiness I cannot tell you or touch or feel or relate the level of being so proud and so happy. And is in that case that I'm citing to you, each and every encounter of each and every person here, you had his full heart, you had his full love, and you had the appreciation of your friendship. By every chasna, I looked for him or he looked for me that we should be able to sit together. And you know, the first name, Yechiel Michal, was the Zlochev Amagen. In Lubavitch, they call him Reb Michal Zlochev. And he had 5 sons. And the world still called them, and they lived 250 years ago, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, Reb Yosef Miyampol, Reb Yitzchak Miradvil, Reb Shlomke Zvil, who was the Balmoifes Hador when he lived. He was Nifter in 1945. His Elta Zayda was one of the 5 sons. They were tremendous. And I want to say to you that if you analyze the family of Michal and Danya, you will see, and I'm not going to hold you here because I used my time slot, but I want to say to you that if you look carefully, each one of those 5 sons of Reb Michal Zlochev excelled in a different, I mean, they were all Kulam Kedoshim and Tahoirim and Bali Moifes. I mean, they were unbelievable. But they excelled in different areas for Klal Yisrael. And you can find it in his family. If you go down the children, Arla, Avremi, each one in a different way, you will find that the descendancy and the genealogy bears testimony to the type of person that he was in his children and his grandchildren. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Every Simchas Torah, the Rebbe was teaching a new nigun. This particular Simchas Torah, he was teaching the nigun Stav Ya Pit Piatnicu. People couldn't understand the words. And I was over there in the back, all of a sudden the Rebbe Kitzur Hakev, und sagt mir, Raskin, переводи. That means I should translate the words of the nigun. So sage ich, я сам не могу разобраться. That means I don't understand, I can't nicht voneinander kleiden. So the Rebbe looked at me and started to spell the nigun. Stav Ya Pitu is nicht только the word in nicht in English, nicht in Ukrainish. So the Rebbe looked at me and started to spell the nigun Stav Ya Pit U в Piatnitsu. That means I started to drink on Friday. Пропу я пропу свою телицу. I mean, everybody probably knows how it goes. But when it comes to треба знати, як гуляти, that means you have to know how to freilich, to гулять. Aber mit darf обнем хежем. What I took a big impression on me, the way he says, перед паном хозяином отвечайте. Паном хозяином, that means the Rebbe, the Balabos, отвечайте.
Feel free to join along. Stavia pitu piatnicu, piatnicu, prabuviaya prabov svayu telitu, treba znati yakulyati, treba znati yak perchati. Ahoy cheshboin tzedek odavati prebanom chazayinom od vechati ahay mi piem da piem damigo yayem mir trinken yayin azoy wie mayim mir sagen alle zusammen lechaim wie atot ishma min hashamayim stavia pitu subatu subatu Prabuviaya prabov svayu rabovatu treba znati yakoyati treba znati yak perchati ahoy cheshboin tzedek odavati Prebanom chazayinom oz verchati ahoy mi piem da piem tamigo yayem mir trinken yayin azoy wie mayim mir sagen alle zusammen lechaim wie atot ishma min hashamayim.
Thank you very much, Ari Raskin from Montreal. Ari had the privilege to be part of my father's Malava Malka Club in 1355. And today he's in Montreal, and he is fulfilling what my father feels like was his shlichus, because the Rebbe told him to live in Montreal after he got married, and he's so proud that he now has Einoklach in Montreal, like Ari and Getzi Markowitz. Again, thank you everybody for sitting and enjoying and being inspired. I just want to tell you, whenever I used to take my father somewhere and I was trying to get there on time or close to on time, he would always tell me, "Yag sag nicht. Let's ein paar Minuten spät." So everybody, thank you for being here, and there's more to come. And when I was a child, one of my earliest memories, everybody has their earliest memories, was of going to 770 with my father to the back of shul where he would sit together with his cousins. And every single Shabbos, we came a little after 10 o'clock. They would have a siddur waiting for him and a place waiting for him, and they greeted him, and it was week by week, the same thing. These were his first cousins who we know that my father loved, like I said before, everybody, especially his cousins, and these were his cousins from his father. His uncle Shalomber's sons, Lazer and Yeshua, who were there actually. And I would like to ask Rabbi Eliezer Lane to please come up and share some words with us.
Good evening. I was asked by the family to share my personal experience with Michal, Daniel, the home. My relationship with Michal, Olav Shalom, hard to say Olav Shalom, goes back 50 years, more than 50 years. I came to the Rebbe for Pesach with the Kvutze, Tovshin Chavches, that's 1968. Couple of days later, I lost my father. I was a Yosem. Michal adopted me like his own son, but literally. I'm looking at the copy of the Matzeve, and I see over there that Michal was orphaned before his bar mitzvah. And these are the words that Michal used when he came to comfort me. But he didn't just say it, he didn't just say words. It was with heart, devotion, caring, to comfort me just like a father. I'm looking further down at the Matzeve, and it says that Michal was an exemplary father to his younger brothers. And I feel like adding to me too. My father and Michal's father were brothers, so we are cousins. However, he wasn't just a cousin. I have, Baruch Hashem, a lot of cousins, and I love them dearly. But Michal was to me like a father. A recent example, Simcha Raskin, went to visit Michal in Lakewood. And those that are close to Michal know what Lakewood was about. And he asked Simcha, was macht Laser? Beyond words. I can't continue speaking about my relationship with Michal, or rather Michal's relationship with me, while reading further down the Matzeve about his hand squeeze to others. And I would like to add, not just to others, but for me as well. It takes me back to Simchas Torah Tovshin Lamed Daled, 1973, the year that the shul in 770 was extended all the way to Kingston Avenue. Everyone, including myself, moved up our Hakofe place all the way towards Kingston Avenue. Suddenly, after the second or the third Hakofe, a group of newly arrived Bochrim from Russia stormed in to our side of the bleachers after they must have had Kiddush. And they started smacking everyone off the places. No mokim kavua. They broke my glasses. I went outside. I washed my face, calmed down, and I was trying to get back in. But for those of us, and I'm sure that most of us remember the Hakofes in 770 and Simchas Torah, there was one way out, but there wasn't a way back in. I pushed myself a little bit in, and suddenly I hear a familiar voice calling my name. Laser! Laser! I look up and I see Michal is standing on the highest bleacher, and he says to me, come join me. We came. I was hardly able to look for a little spot to have an edge so that I should see the Rebbe by the Hakofe. I pushed myself back towards that bleacher, and Michal bent himself all the way down. He chapped me by my sotuk and my short collar, and he lifted me up like a crane to the bleacher, to the spot next to him. The Bochrim that was standing over there obviously didn't like it too much. And they started pushing me around, and Michal turned to them, and he said, this is my cousin. If you push him, I'll have to squeeze you. And he gave them a sample. Talking about Simchas Torah, Simchas Torah for me was going on the Hafsoke between the Fabrengen and Hakofes to Michal and Zolzano Gishe Daniel's house. But I want to tell you, many of you are not that young. It was like the Grand Central Station. For a moment you thought that 770 moved into their house and everyone got their attention. And I remember many times Michal would call me over, Lezerke, komm setz dich zu. I was sitting by the table, called me over to himself to be close. And I said to him, Michal, zog stavia pitu. The way he said it, we sang a nigun, we don't sing a nigun, we say a nigun, we sing a song. So I said, zog stavia pitu. And the Elom, it was full house, started quietly singing the nigun. And we came to Treba Treba Ya Golati, Treba Treba Ya Brechati. And he says, Lezerke, mi trinkt, mi singt und mi holet. Aber oi, חשבון צדק עוד אהבתי. Mi darf nicht liegen in Stussim. Many simches, Michal, and so sein auch geschehen, Daniel came to our house. Michal sat at the table, and he was watching my grandfather clock. And he called me over, and he said, Laser, cook. Ding, dang, ding, dang. Noch eine Minute weg und noch eine Minute weg. Die Minuten kommen nicht zurück. Laser, sag kannst von mir als ein Segen. Ich will das haben in mein Haus. I want to have one like this in my house. And if you walk into the house, you will find the grandfather clock right on the side of the table where Michal was sitting. Yeah? Last but not least, I want to tell you about the Sefer Avnei Chaim. Avnei Chaim, the first Hebrew edition, had a terrible error about how my father and his sister Rivka Aleichem Shalom came to Leningrad, how Michal's mother and the family left Leningrad, and how Tzachadobe left Russia. It was a mistake. I got the information from a Raskin member of the family, and I took it for granted. But it was what it was. And Michal called me over, and he said, Laser, there's a terrible mistake. I told him, Michal, I know about it. I'm preparing an English edition of the book, and in Mirza Hashem, I will fix it over there. He said to me, you're going to have an English edition? And since I ever told him I was going to have an English edition, he kept on encouraging me, asking me for updates. And he said, Ich mutsche dir, aber sie verdienen nicht lach. I want my grandchildren to have the Sefer. At the time, Michal also shared with me a couple of nuggets that he heard from our Zayde, Rabbi Yeshua. He was about 10 years old. He went to visit Zayde Yeshua in Rudny. And he shared with me a couple of nuggets, and I printed it in the book. Michal cherished the book Avnei Chaim of the Chaim Lane illustrious dynasty like it was part of him, and it was indeed part of his life. He purchased a few dozen books for his children, I believe, for his grandchildren, the great-grandchildren. And he had Arik, soll sein gesund, inscribe under his instructions that they should know and remember where they come from, and hopefully they will follow the footsteps. I would like to finish off with a final comment about the last line and the Matzeva. I got hooked up with the Matzeva. It was done so well, so properly, so true, and appropriate. And the last line on the Matzeva, it says that Reb Michal was nifter. Parshas Vo'ero el ha'ovos. Now, we look in the cemetery, a lot of people use different psukim from the parsha to associate with the nifta. But Rashi is used very seldom. And whoever put together the Matzeva together with Arik, they wrote Vo'ero el ha'ovos. There is a fascinating explanation by the Rebbe why Rashi wrote El Ha'ovos. while the Pasuk says, Vo'ero el Avraham, el Yitzchok, ve'el Yaakov. I'm not going to go into the details, it's very long, but in one word, the Rebbe explains that Rashi says, El Ha'ovois, these are the patriarchs of the Mishpacha, these are the patriarchs of the Eden. And Michal has joined the patriarchs of our family. Reb Peretz, our Alter Zayder Reb Chaim David, our Zayder Reb Yeshua, and in the words of the Rebbe Rayatz, Reb Peretz and his son, they are the pillars of Chabad and to perpetuate the stories for the future generations. And Michal has now joined them and is pasmakiving Zach from the Zera Berach Hashem, the children, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, from both sides, that both of them raised, both Michal and Zoltan Oglishay Daniel. And where does it all come from? That comes from their parents, from Michal's parents, Reb Aaron Leib and Tzotche Dobe, and from Zoltan Oglishay Daniel's parents, Reb Getzel and Tzotche Rose. May we reflect and internalize, and it should be V'hachai iten el liboy.
Thank you very much, Rav Laser Lane. As he mentioned how my father was a father to him, and we know that he was a father to his brothers, I think now is the time to mention that on the day that a few of us had the shlichus to go to tell my father that his brother Berke was no longer with us. It was me and two nephews, and we had to try to break the news to him. And when we did, he said, "Ich weiß nicht, für was ich hab geboren geworden." This was for his brother, who was a little younger than him. That's what he said about his brother, as if he doesn't have a family and everything. He said, "Es kann nicht sein, das ist am ärgsten Tag." So we'd like to now bench everybody, Yibadal Chaim Tevim, our Aunt Esther, our uncles, Chaim David, Ben Zion, Henya, and Basi, with our Arichas Yamim Misharim Teves, and they should continue the legacy, and we should make everybody proud. Going to the next generation, back to the grandchildren, I would like to call my dear nephew, somebody that made me an uncle, somebody who made my father a Zayda, and the first uncle that was named Aaron Leib in the family, Ari Edelman, to please come up and share some words. Hi, Savta.
When it came to saying a few words tonight, my first reaction was to decline. What more could I share that is not already known to everyone sitting here in this room tonight? That my Zayda was a great man is not exactly news. When I shared my thoughts with a good friend of mine, Mendel Fishman from Toronto, Canada, who, like many of my friends, enjoyed a close and personal relationship with my Zayda, he said to me, "Speaking tonight has nothing to do with you. You have no choice but to say a few words because you know that your Zayda would very much like for you to speak and that he is certainly listening. My father says a word on last week's Parsha Yisro. What was it that finally convinced the world's preeminent theologian, Yisro, to come and see Bnei Yisrael? The Pasuk clearly tells us the astounding wonders that were the 10 Makkos did not bring him. The departure of the entire Jewish nation from the land of Egypt, where nobody ever got out of, did not bring him. The miracle of Kriyas Yamsuf and the drowning of the Egyptian army did not bring him. When Yisro heard of Milchemas Amalek, that is what caused him to come. Yisro was not impressed by the great miracles that Hashem performed. That just proved that the God of the Jews was great. What impressed him was that Hashem told the Yidden to take up arms and fight for themselves. A God who empowers his people, this is something he had to see, and he came to join Am Yisrael. Zayda, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for empowering us, for educating us on the path to living a Torah life, a Hasidic life, a good life, a meaningful life. As you took us with you on your lifelong journey to make your father proud of you, to show him the lessons he imparted in you with his living example of self-sacrifice and the grave dangers he endured, to stress to you that being a chassid, a frum yid, is something worth risking it all for, you showed us how to be a son. By safeguarding Baba Daba through the harrowing escape from Europe, by providing for her throughout the years so that she lacked for nothing at all, fighting for her to her last day, you showed us the meaning of Kibbud Ein. By sharing with us the stories of Zayda Yeshua Lane, the reverence in your voice when you spoke of him, the stories of his piety, and the education he gave you on how to live as a Yid. Your tales of Zayda Shleima and Baba Basya Raskin, their legendary chesed for any Yid in need, you showed us how to be a grandson. By practically raising Berke, Chaim David, and Benchik, putting their needs over and over in front of your own, by showing us how the first thing you said after being notified of any simcha in the family was, "Did you call my brother?" You showed us how to be a brother. The way you spoke of Zayda Getzel and Baba Raza Rabashkin, the honor you showed them, respect for the way they carried themselves, and the values with which they raised their children with unshakable devotion to the Hasidic principles of life, showed us how to be an Eidim. The love and honor you accorded to Tante Luba Zarchi, how you praised her incredibly sharp wit, how every opportunity to say hello, wish her good Shabbos, give her a gris, was a special occasion not to be missed, showed us how to be a nephew. By making sure we knew every fourth cousin twice removed, their entire family tree, intimate, important details about their lives, making it crystal clear that we are really very, very close and that your home is their home, you showed us what it means to be mishpacha. By working over 70 years, sometimes 18 hours a day, with the muscles of your back and the sweat of your brow, that to you in business, honesty and integrity mattered above all else. You showed us what it means to work hard to provide for your family. By instilling in my uncles and aunts the principles of hard work, trust in the Eibishter, a connection to the Rebbe, to always try to do the right thing, to treat every person as they are your friend, to live a life with Midas HaChesed as the guiding light. you showed us the role of a father. By setting an example for us, when your close friend Reb Arel Sarabransky would come to town for many years, learning together, farbrenging together, you showed us that working on your Yira Shemayim is a lifelong pursuit. As is clearly seen in any picture of Zayda in front of the Rebbe, an absolute giant of a man, clearly as humble and bottle as one can be. The unquestionable, non-negotiable adherence to any directive of the Rebbe, from going immediately to Teim Chetmimim in Montreal as a chassan, to growing your beard before your chasana. You showed the definition of Kabbalas Ol, of what it means to be a chassid. With your open home, your hachnasas archim, to never turn anyone away, to treat everyone who walks through the door, no matter who they may be, as a guest of honor, you showed us how to build our homes. And of course, throughout the years, I would always notice at the Shabbos table, a Yom Tov meal, Zayda would be sitting at the head of a table with no end. And when, after orchestrating a banquet of legendary proportions, individually greeting and serving her myriad guests, Safta would walk into the dining room. It could not be missed. The extra sparkle that shined in his eyes, the pride in his Eishes Chayil, his partner, that radiated from his being. In this, and in many, many other ways, you showed us how to be a husband. For all of these, and for the uncountable lessons of living and life that you shared with me and my cousins, our spouses, and especially our children, who are so lucky to know you, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for showing us what it means to be a Zayda. May we all be Zoicha to live up to your example, to follow the path you paved for us, to live with the values you instilled in us, to remember the lessons you taught us, the stories you shared with us, the history you made alive and relevant for us, to carry us to the day when we will have Mashiach Tzidkenu and be reunited with you, B'Karv Mamish.
Thank you very much, Ari. Anybody, and especially everybody in this room, knows my parents. And you all know that at this hour, this is when the party just begins. So sit back and relax. Parshas Yisroi, the Aseres Adibris, we learned Sheishes Yomim Tavoid Va'asisa Kol Malachtecha V'Yom Hashvi Shabbos L'Hashem Aleikecha. Simply that means, for 6 days you work, and on the 7th day you rest. We all know about my father that he worked very hard all week long. And there are people that want to tell you that business is business and family is family. But for my father, his family was his business, and the people that he encountered in his business became his family. Whether it was Hakaras HaTov that he showed to people that he worked with for one summer, over 60 years ago, we would go visit them every single summer as if he knew them for like all his life. And he spent 2 months with them because they gave him somewhere to have his brothers. While their mother was in Camp Emunah, he had something for his brothers to do, so he sweated in the kitchen. Berka also helped in the kitchen, but the younger brothers were swimming and being waiters, having fun. And every summer we would go, say thank you, and show Hakaras HaTov. Or to one of his customers who also passed away recently, who he would make a point lately in the summer to go visit him in South Fallsburg, because he would always say that this customer, Rabbi Resnick, he had hana by giving me an order, by giving me parnasa. But Rabbeinu Bechaya teaches this pasuk differently. Rabbeinu Bechaya says, "Sheisas yamim ta'avoid, v'asisa kol malachtecha." Tavod means to be Oived Hashem. Mashvi Shabbos Lashem Aleikacha. That in your business, in your workday, you're being Oived Hashem. Everybody knows that my father, on the corner of Kingston and President, would be on the corner sometimes, scanning who's walking up and down, and then he would invite people over to his house. Shabbos, he was a guy named Oived Hashem, but where was he? In his element, at the table, at my mother's table, at their table. And it wasn't just having a Shabbos meal and going to sleep. It was an avodah. One of the people that he encountered once on the corner, and we all know that my father had a handshake, but when he shook your hand and squeezed it, he was actually scanning up and down, reading what's behind the person's exterior. We are privileged today to have somebody who met my father many years ago on Kingston and President, and he flew in specially for tonight. And we'd like to ask Rabbi Yosef Langer to please come up and share a few words.
I got off the boat. Actually, the boat was an airplane. And I walked up Kingston Avenue. First, I dropped by the yeshiva where I was supposed to go and checked the situation out to see if there was some food to eat. I was a hungry guy. No food to eat. Shabbos was coming upon us, and someone said, Go to Raskin's. Go to Raskin's. They'll set you up. So I walked up Kingston Avenue. And I donned my I donned my Sputnik. I didn't know I wasn't going to be the first one tonight. There's other Sputniks here, but this was a special Sputnik. This was made by a girlfriend of my sister. She was a Gentile, and she knew that I was going to a Hasidic community, and she wanted to give me a Hasidic hat. Danya, doesn't this look like a Hasidic hat? Danya, does this look like a Hasidic hat? Very much so, she said. She gives her blessing. So Michal was standing at the door, and he gave me the once-over, the Michal once-over from the toes. I had my hiking boots on from California. I had a coat from the Bachram, went down to Manhattan, got me a coat to wear for the cold winter. And the girlfriend of my sister gave me this beautiful Sputnik. So Michal got stuck on the Sputnik. I mean, wouldn't everyone get stuck on the Sputnik, Danya? It's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So Michal said, "Where'd you get the Sputnik?" Instead of explaining it, he said, "What are you doing here? Why?" So I couldn't get into the store. He was blocking the door. You can't get past Michal. So I said, "I'm getting fruit and vegetables for Shabbos." The Hadar Torah did not have a kitchen, so I needed fruit and vegetables. So he says, "You came here to get fruit and vegetables?" I said, "Yes." So he said, "I think you should come to my home, to my Danya. She'll set you up with fruit and vegetables and fish for my brother, and you name it, gourmet, sheba gourmet." It was out of out of the box, out of the box. And the carpet, this is dull compared to the carpet in Danya's house. It was gorgeous, beautiful carpeting, beautiful people, outrageous Russian peasants, aristocratic Russian peasants, a few hippies sprinkled in between. You name it, they were at the table. And I was in my home. This is like Berkeley, California. I felt I was in my home. And I knew that this is what I wanted in my life. I wanted this type of home. And so that became my home for Shabbos. I went to their home when they purchased a home on Piedmont. And I sat by Michal, right? He had me sit right next to him. And he said, he looked down, he looked over the whole operation. He looked down on the floor and he says, why aren't you wearing socks with your shoes? So I said, my feet are hot, they're sweating. He says, no. This is the Rebbe, this is Kingston and President Street. This is the Rebbe's territory. You wear socks when you come to Kingston and President Street. I said, okay, I'm in on it. I'm in for socks for life. Okay? So this is how it started. And this is how it begins and begins and begins. Michal said, if you want baby feet, when you're 80, you massage your feet with oil, coconut oil. I have the coconut oil here for Danya. Anyone that needs, here it is right here. Anyone that wants to have baby feet at 80, this is the answer. So that's how it was. And what a guy. This guy was a guy. He was a guy's guy. And everyone here, I'm sure, misses him dearly with all their heart and soul. It was so nice to come into Getzel's shul and sit down to him and feed him fish. And sit next to him and cuddle him. Such a special man. God bless you all. You made his life for him, and he made his life for us. God bless you. This is mine. This is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing those memories, Rabbi Langer, the head shliach of San Francisco, California. Just a reminder that there's going to be a siyum coming up. And some nice video productions. Thank you, Swish Media, Moshe and Getzi Raskin, for all you did tonight. And now, please give your attention to the screens for a never-before-seen video with recently found footage. Thank you.
Once, I was delivering stuff to my customers, wholesale, from the restaurants, yeshivas, take-home foods, and so on. Such place. Bring in a place on 49th Street on 16th Avenue was a take-home food. You know, take-home food. And the manager was a boychik, a bocher by the name of Yossi. Yossi gonna be so kvarpe. So after a little time, I tell Yossi, how come you got such a Lubavitch name? So he tells me that his father was a very good friend with the Rebbe, very good. They used to live on Eastern Parkway between Kingston and Albany. When he was in business, then he wanted to do business in Texas, the movement in Texas. And I was born in Texas. So when I was born, the Tat asked the Rebbe should come to Texas to be Sunday Kois. So the Rebbe sent the Rabbi Simpson. He was Sunday. Und der kam schon mal Jahr 26. Das ist jung, aber 26 und noch nicht Kassen gehabt. Der Josi weiß, mit der Schiddich, so gehst du zum Rebbe, doch dein Sunday. Dein Sunday. He knows your father, he knows you. So, Korpe, Mr. Raskin. When I go to the Rebbe, and I want to ask him something, the guy's pushing me, and I have no time to tell him what I want to say. She said, Korpe, go to Ringo. Like, Yossi, next time when you want to go to the Rebbe, ask me, and I'll go with you. I'll be behind you. Guarantee nobody will gonna push you. Kakave, and to call from Iraq, Mr. Raskin, you remember? And Mr. Raskin, I go tonight to Israel, and I want to see the Rebbe before. So, yeah, I'm ready. Ich war bin ich gegangen und gesagt, Leibler, und der und sie war sagen, da Bocher, der Beisberg und sein Tate. Ja, er Beisberg der Tate gewesen, alles gut. Und ich sage ihm, der Meister, mit dem was Bocher im Pushen haben, und er kann ihn sagen, die ganze Sache zu der Rebbe. Und ich gehe mit ihm, sollst du wissen, was sagt, er war mal Schiddich.
Das ist der Sohn von Abraham Sieg, zum Ogen in Texas. Das hat verbrochen. Und das schreiben wir. Das hat verbrochen, was ich.
Dann bekommen man so ein Papier, und dann nach Hause, dann nach Zwoche. Dann Schule stehen.
Und doch, die Woche ist er weggefahren. Geht durch a short time. I got a telephone from Israel. Mr. Raskin, I became a host. So, Yossi, what are you going to do? I think I'm going to, she's from South Africa, and I go to South Africa. Stehe ich auf dem Gas, und Lebel Groner hoort vorbei mit der Car, und ich mag geschossen, und sag dem Rem, als jener Bocher, geworden nach Hause, darf sagen dem Rem, gute Nacht, sehe ich nicht nur Nudjenen. Mit der Wert. Und please gib mir bei dem Rem. Ist durchgegangen, a Zeit, wir gehen zum Kirschelbruch. Wir gehen zum Kirschelbruch, ich bin der Kirschelbruch und sagt, nur mir haben etwas aufgetan, na? At first glance, I forgot about the whole story. I made one step further already, but it's a ich nicht gehen. Nu, mir haben etwas zugetan, na?
Thank you very much, Rabbi Elkanah Shmutkin. And the team at GEM for helping find that footage, the priceless footage, to make this video tonight. Moving right along, when the Raskin brothers came in 1953, in the summer of 1953, with their mother, they stayed in Brownsville by their aunt and uncle, Meir and Libazarchi. And my father says that he remembers the first Shabbos. His cousin Shalom Berveshetsky was there, and he did not see the Rebbe yet. My father did not see the Rebbe yet. And they took the walk from Brownsville to 770. My father says that he came and he saw people standing outside, schmoozing. He walks inside to this hallway, opens the first door. He looks inside. He doesn't see anything. He closes the door. So he tells his cousin, Shalom Ervashetsky, Olav Shalom, where's the Rebbe? I don't see the Rebbe. He says, what did you see? He said, I saw a tall, handsome man like davening, standing and davening. Black beard. So he tells him that was the Rebbe. And in my father's words, he says that was my first encounter with the Rebbe. A cousin who was there at the time, a dear cousin, Rabbi Shlomo Zarchi, the Mashpia and the Manal of Temchet Mimim, we'd like to ask him to come up and share some words. Thank you.
A good year, Alan, yeah. A couple of Michal and Daniel were us, not our first cousin. I remember the day when Michal came from Paris and we went to the boat. We finally had family. My mother used to cry day and night. Her mother was left in Russia. Her two brothers were left in Russia, and two sisters were left in Russia. Baruch Hashem, my sister came with the 4 children. It was a very big simcha, yeah. Yeah, I remember when and Daniel lived across the street in Chester and Pitkin, yeah, and Papa Telephone Company with Reb Gessel, the whole family. We used to buy Essie together. My father, Reb Gessel, yeah. And that's how it started even before they got married, Michal and Daniel. We were very close, yeah. My mother had a cousin, uncle, and Leningrad also, a Rubashkin married her sister, yeah. But call upon him about the Lane side, later Lane spoke, because they also were gehad with sich by my Zayda's house in Gorky. Schon the Lane got married in Gorky, in my Zayda's house. My mother always spoke about Laid, that he came to Gorky to marry Dobbe with me. Everything was done in my Zayda's house, yeah. It was the house from Avraham Avinu, mine. And Michal came there from Leningrad, yeah. And Michal always told the story the way he ran away from school. He was a strong kid, and he ran up, he climbed up the building, he jumped in the window. His father was davening and crying. And he waited to his father, he finished davening, and he said, Tata, Papa, he said, he's crying that he could not talk, you should have a beard. Tata, Papa, practically when it's home, his father not get on the gate in the school and with the paskudnik ladle uniform they had to put on. Yeah. I can't look at the uniform. Yeah. And the pale, they all left to go to Mazeda, and we still had a few things to attend in Leningrad to fix by this Chosser machine, by that Chosser, all the big shit in there. He couldn't leave yet. But he wanted to leave. It was like too late. In Germany, they broke all the bridges, and he stood there. And all the Chassidim, all the Eden, millions of people died from hunger, and he was a strong Eid. The strong people died the first from hunger, yeah. And my Zayda used to cry to Michal. Michal always used to tell me, what's a diamond teich? In Gorken, only Scotsing. And the pale, Michal told me, was full of Scotsing, and everybody in the whole place was so goyish. He swore to me he never touched anything that he was not allowed to touch. He was an Amesir Shemaim with all the things and all the steps in Russia, what Gorky was all about, the Goyish stuff. He was a Fumi Eid. His Zayda used to cry and say brachas. And his father, Rabin Tzin, did the Sichis. I found the Eid, the Shtetlef mit Nacht, Fatog, and he says, brachas, he cries, that his children, his Emeklach, should all be from the Eden. So this is a part of the family that everybody knows, the Raskin part of the family, was Benzin Raskin, and Shlomo Raskin, and all the Raskin shit. Michal is named not after the Raskin part of him, it's named after Michal Shabanin, yeah. My grandmother, Baba Basia, her father was Michal Shabanin. There's a whole story in the Yeshiva he married my grandfather. It's not now to tell the whole story, yeah. But the end of the story was that the Rebbe Rashab said that Michal Za'elachid, my grandfather should do the Yeshiva with Michal Shabanin, for Michal Za'elachid, yeah. And of course, if the Burim page talks in Aleph, if you ever writes who Michal Shaban was, yeah, a special person, that Michal was named after him. And the Basi, everybody had a hashpah, he used to tell me on his life and so forth. The day they used to cry day and night, was the time of the Emeklach. I could hardly have children, every daughter came back without a husband, without a this. And Yisrael with houses full of Yisrael, yeah. And the pale, Michal and the whole family, how they got out, fine, they went through Österreich and everything, and to France, the whole. And then Michal came in America, and ungefähr 2 years later, with the Shidduch, with Diamond, with the Gitonzach, yeah. They were all my father's house, with Getzel and Michal and everybody. And the pale, there's a part, and Michal was always around at the Rebbe. It was by the Seder, the Rebbe asked me, where's Michal, yeah? When the Rebbe went to Tashlach, we all know, when the Rebbe climbed over the fence in the big rain, who was next to the Rebbe? Michal. And Michal and Yisrael Buchner wanted to pick up the Rebbe over the fence. The Rebbe said, I'll do it myself, everybody should go away, but a few times Michal and Yisrael Buchner tried to pick up the Rebbe. And by her quarters, who is, today you have walls and mices and tables, and all was a ring. They took the strong people from 70. They should make a ring and hold up. Who was there was a ring with Michal Raskin, yeah. When the Rebbe Sachana passed away, and the Rebbe said there's a meaning to put a straw under a person, the old Rebbe Kaddish, the old Persin, all said, we could get straw in Mitzvah Shabbat late at night. The Rebbe turned around to Yisrael Buchman and said, Yisrael, geh zu Michal auf the other side, nehmt a Belgium, take a broom, the broom is to take out a straw, and tear up the broom and it would be a straw. I don't know what the problem of straw. But Michal's name was on the Rebbe's tongue. Yisrael geh zu Michal, it was a problem. And there was many more stories like this of a chulum that Michal, I remember his Ufa was in Kippur, and the Chassid was your Gimel Tishrei, and the Shavuot was Sukkot time, yeah. Fine, and Michal always used to say, when the Rebbe told him to Palazar board and go to Montreal, he saw his father standing behind the Rebbe and crying to him, and behind the Rebbe and telling him he should grow a beard. And Michal went away to Montreal, and I think the Rebbe didn't let him come back till the middle of the 7 days. You couldn't see the Kala. And Kippur was the Ufafnish, and Gimel Tishrei was the Chasana, and the Rebbe was inside the Kedushin. Everybody was speaking before about the Chnosa Sorchev, Michal and Danya. You all remember from President Street, some remember from Kingston and President, and Papa the Food Store. I remember it was in 763 some Parkway. When they lived across the street in a small little apartment on the other side of the building, and people used to go to Masfera and always Shabbos to their house and the Kiddush, when I had a small, tiny apartment, not President Street and not 763. I remember even when they had a country, 1 bedroom, they used to invite my brothers and my sister. We didn't have money to go to the country. So every summer, Michal and Dan used to take my sisters and my brother and they were a few weeks in their country when they had only 1 room, 1 bedroom, and 1 kitchen. Something kitchen, like this. Not when they had the big houses. Chnosa Sorchev doesn't start when you have the big house. Chnosa Sorchev starts and you have place in your heart for Nacha Eden. So 763, after they got married, everybody went across the street to their house also from the Kiddush and so forth and so forth. Yeah. So this was, and I thought we're like 1 family when Michal had to go to the country. So I used to go with a 12-year-old kid. I had the whole store in my head on Sunday till Michal came Monday morning. we were like one family. And the Michal used to come every night to eat in our house. He brought his whole duch many times. And we all ate supper by my mother in Brownsville, and later on Montgomery Street. We were sitting with English mamish. So this is what, even now when Michal was very sick, he used to call me plenty times, how's my wife, how am I, how am I this? So Michal, don't have to, and Daniel called me about this simcha, that simcha. So we were not first cousins, they were like my older brother and older sister, and we worried about us all, and it was a Chassidish Eid. That's when the Kudah is. When they bring God, it's not like a Eid with Chalas's Orchem only. He did it because of the Chassidish Eid. All the Polish Eid say in Mazeda's house, where Michal had his sach. And bombs were flying in World War II, because Gorky was next, it was like an army place. The Germans bombed it good. And the Polish Eid, Zeda was afraid, bomb was fleeing. She said, they told me, in your house, a bomb is not going to fall down. So I brought him in his house. A Polish Eid used to come here, stayed by Michal Raskin. The whole story, the way they saved him, he got the best place in Zeda's house. They put him under the table, so nobody could step on his feet. He had swollen feet. Yeah. And more Polish Eid, even all the Eden, hundreds of people pierced Gorka, and they were all in my Zayden's house and gave him to eat and so forth. And the Lane family, Nemanov, and all these people were saved by my Zayden. So I just want to end off. Michal is in good company now. The Lane, the Shia Lane. Shia Lane was an Eid. The Germans killed them, and later, and we had a Keva Achim, they were buried together. They say the earth shakes a few days. And later, when they took him out, he was a ganzer Guf. He was a holy Jew. Yeah. That's in the Lane family. The Blazer Lane spoke already about it. Then the Shloshim Raskin, then Tina Raskin, Michal Sherbina. Now they found the Mateva in Lubavitch, because Sherbina was a village next to Lubavitch. They found it of his wife, Liebe Michal, whom my mother's named after. I called upon him, taking a good company, and they're taking good care of him, because Michal was not only an Achmal Machnas, he was the Chassidish Eid, Kshantim, big Chassidim. He did it not because only he had a good heart. That's also true, but he was a Chassidish Eid, and this is what he gave over to his children, to his Eineklach and to his Ur-Eineklach. And Daniel is gesund. She's boss like an older sister. And her family and Chesson Pitkin was like, were like one family, as she got here. And mine, we were all lived in Chester and Pitkin. I davened with Reb Getzel. Chedder Nachricht Gisol on Chester Street, yeah. We were one Mishpache. Mashiach kommt bald. And wir seien gesund. And so nach the children, I don't have to tell the children they should be Mechaber, the mother, the brother, because that's how they grew up. That's their home and she is there. A mother and the grandmother. And alle seien gesund. And the Mashiach Dicke should come soon. They all be together. And the Rebbe Anführung von Zalmen. I want to say also, on Kingston Present, the Rebbe's mother always used to stay. I used to pierce at 70. She used to eat and to go into Michal Raskin's store and take a package of fruit and put it by her door. The Rebbe's not soon coming home, and she wanted to have it. And after the Rebbe's pierced away, Rebbe Sachane, Rebbe used to stay on Kingston Present and greet every person. Like a person that didn't have any boys, she said, you're having a boy now. And this lady said, you're having a girl now. She gave brachas to everybody that passed. And after that, after the Rebbe passed away, so Michal Raskin himself used to stay on Kingston Present and greet everybody. So this is a corner that everybody was greeted. And not only Shalom Aleichem, Bechule, the Eberslav und alle seien gesund und tanzen allen zusammen, zum Mashiach zu kommen.
Thank you, Reb Shlomo. We should continue the Verbegen by Simchas. Moving right along, it's getting a little late, but we're having fun. Our next speaker was responsible for some of the footage that we're going to see tonight, and he actually recorded a lot of stories that firsthand from my father. And he made a trip today all the way from Montreal. It's a 6-hour trip, but don't worry, he's not going to share with us all the thoughts that he had for the past 6 hours driving here. We'd like to thank Getzi Markowitz for keeping it short, and thank Rabbi Getzi Markowitz for coming, and ask him to come, please, and share some words.
My mother's defending me. Shalom Zayda would say that Getzi Markowitz can't keep things short. Safta, Levi, and Shalom, just when Berka Zavek and Shalom was there, you FaceTimed me to talk to Zayda. And Zayda was sitting and shuckling Azoy. He says, Getzel, kann ich verstehen? Jetzt ist geboren geworden. And I'd like to communicate before I share what I want to share that Zayda had this high definition, incredible way of the jetzt is passiert. The en français. He said that when Berke passed away, that I can't fathom it. He was just born. And what I'm trying to communicate is that that was the feeling, that was the sentiment. That's what Zayda always communicated, that things are happening now. Mori shoynim misinai, like Rashi says in this week's parsha. Hafeilu misinai. Everything was so real and so raw and so true and so transparent. I want to thank everybody for being here. And I want to particularly address those who are watching over the internet. So many have been WhatsApping throughout the night. We're watching, we miss him, we learned from him, we loved him. This is counterintuitive because for a grandchild to stand up in front of the assembled is actually a natural thing for most of us because we were always on display in 1355 President Street. We were your lunch and dinner entertainment, your choir, your magic show. We were your servers. We were the little helpers, the little partners, part of a big time of Avos Yisrael and Achnosas Orchim. If we don't know your name, we would venture that you're either mishpacha or a gute friend. A fifth cousin, a cousin's cousin. These were classifications and categories that were as foreign to Zayda and to Safta as the words chesed, tzedakah, or achnosas orchem. You were either a gute friend or you were a mishpacha, or you were a gute friend who was eligible to become mishpacha kedas Moshe v'Yisrael. You were the pedestrian on Kingston Avenue, Kingston and President, the true Brooklyn Junction, where do not walk meant you were about to be invited to take a stroll down the lanes of history. You were a bacher from Adart. You were a bacher from Adart Torah. Sorry. And the young lady from Machon Chana. Watch the lessons of Yadis come alive on a rich and literal Shulchan Aruch. Some were the disowned, the disenchanted, the chief rabbi, the Crown Heights simpleton, the head shliach, the new immigrant, the widow, the orphan. Everyone felt at home in Zayda's presence because the secret was in your company, he felt most at home. And were it not for the events of Zayda's youth, he would have likely been a scholar. Yet he knew everyone and everything, and he knew one thing above all, and we know it too, that everything comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. And he was endlessly grateful. Haidei LaHashem. So I'd like to thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving Safta and Zayda to each other, and for giving us to the two of you. And I'd also, I don't know if it's the appropriate forum, but Zayda taught us to be thankful. I want to make a public thank you to my cousins and my uncles and my aunts, my parents and my siblings, who were or made themselves local and be zeiche to be Mishama Zayda over the last while. You did it as he would, without fanfare, without noise, and without even knowing that you were doing something extraordinary. I spent a lot of time bringing with Zayda, as Shalom mentioned. My cousin Getzel, who wishes he could be here tonight as well, and I spent 2 years having breakfast every morning with Zayda. And I did so in the efforts to perhaps write a book of his story. And he spoke to me for hours. But he never ever spoke about himself. He spoke about the heroes, the legends, and the personalities who shaped him. So bli neder, I intend to one day bring these stories to print. But I can't stand here and share it properly, so what I would like to do for a couple of minutes, with her permission, is to share a few text messages that my wife Shana has been sending me about Zayda. Considering that there's another part of the family, there's the granddaughters and the grandsons who married in. And I'd like to try to share her words, if you'll permit me. And I quote, I grew up with a grandfather in Australia and one in Eretz Yisrael, and Zayda was my one and only local Zayda. From day one, Zayda took me on as one of his own. He called me Shendele. Her name's Shana, by the way. And I figured he just didn't catch my name, but it was his special term of endearment. He would always respond to my words of appreciation. I love you and Getzel and the Kinderlach so much. He had his way of making every grandchild feel like they were his favorite, somehow not just grandkids, but even the great-grandkids. Like Getzi so aptly put it, is Zayda who could stretch nachas to no limit. Somehow, with each new great-grandchild born Kinahara, he loved them like they were the first ones to come around. I remember bringing Ganesha home from the hospital, but first making an important stop at 1355. We wanted Zayda to meet her. He loved to tell the kids how he remembered Zayda David, Baba Ida, Baba Ganesha, and Zayda Baruch from Paris, and his wonderful memories of them. I heard our kids talking. David tells Ganesha, I think I was his favorite. Ganesha says, I think we were his favorite family. But then over the week of Shiva, I heard so many cousins say to them, say the same thing. And like Bubby, my mother, says, it was all true. He meant it to every single one of us. We were privileged, Shana and I, to live one short block away from Safta and Zayda when we lived in New York. And boy, did we take advantage. We'd stop by almost every time we walked by. Nothing like peeking in and seeing Zayda sitting at his kitchen stool, watching him slowly make his way to the door and lighting up when he saw us. If Safta opened the door, she'd say, Zayda will be thrilled that you're here. And we'd make our way down the corridor and tap him on the shoulders. I loved having them so close by. Sometimes we walked home from Kingston and I'd eat my sweet expressions while he'd eat his gepatchket homemade yogurt, his homemade cottage cheese, and rattle off its health benefits. And if we brought some pizza over, he'd verzuch. I never took Zayda being at our simchas for granted. We could tell that it meant the world to him, and it literally made our simchas. We were so privileged to have Zayda make the trip all the way to Montreal for Aaron and Tanchum's brisim. I will never forget his face when we named our Aaron Leib. I remember standing there, watching his emotion, thinking that all these years and all the Adam Leibs can have later, how he truly kept Zayda Adam Leib alive. And it fascinates me how my children, Zayda Adam Leib's great-great-grandchildren, talk about him like someone they met in their lives. That's just Shabbos, as we sat around the table discussing Zayda. They asked questions about their elder Zayda. Aaron says, if Baba Dabba is Zayda's mother and Adam Leib was his father, and Adam Leib is Adam Leib Baba Dabba's husband, and I look at my David, who is approaching his 11th birthday and has a mother, I can't wrap my brain around all that Zayda went through at such a young age. Somehow, he didn't just survive it, he thrived it. Sorry for the cliche, but that's the truth. He lived and he loved like the giant he was, loved us just the same, and never ever lost an opportunity to let us know how he felt about each and every one of us. He always wanted to know what we were up to, what's Getzi up to. He heard from Itchy and he heard from Zeldi. He was always making sure to share the compliments. When he came to visit our house in Montreal, he wanted to see every corner. He somehow made it down slowly, the long, narrow stairs to the basement and to the garage because he wanted the full tour, quote. This past Hanukkah, while Zayda was in Lakewood, We got to light the menorah with him on FaceTime. Thank you, Yankee. Ketzi wasn't home, so David was appointed to light for us. He was so excited to show Zayda and the kids saying Haneres Halalu. I could tell it was hard for him to move much, but he managed to put his hands and fingers together to form a heart on the screen. It was hard for him, but he watched the kids sing the whole Haneres Halalu. And even though he couldn't talk, I could see how much he enjoyed it. That was Zayda's life, his kids and his grandkids. Getzi says that I don't know the golden days of Zayda, but what I saw over these last 12 years felt pretty golden to me. He watched me feed the babies, and he would tell me how he remembers his mother squeezing potatoes into liquid to feed her babies. Oi kinderlach, du kennst nicht verstehen. And you'd see a look on his face from another time. And it was like he was from another world, but the most present with it, getting it Zayda at the same time. He told me I can die tomorrow. I have everything. I have all of you. I just want to add, Zayda, these are my words, that in fact you're going to live forever. We're going to take the responsibility very seriously. And we're going to line up behind Safta to greet you back with us. Take it from Iyad. All that muscle that we saw in the video is now where it could be very effective. And may it be Begula Mitzvah Shlema now.
Thank you very much, Getzi. I know I said thoughts and not texts, but it was well worth it. Thank you. Thank you, Shayna. Moving right along, now to another title that my father has. His nephews and nieces know him as the best uncle. And I would like to ask one of his nephews that was a nephew who welcomed my father into the family and who was by his wedding, and somebody that my father was very proud of with his dinners with Kel Chabad. And Shalom would always get a car, especially lately, to pick my parents up to go to the dinner, and my father would always have lots of nachas from the dinners and from everything of Kel Chabad and in general of his nephews and nieces. And I'd like to ask Rabbi Shalom Duchman to please share a few words.
I'll be very, very short. There's nothing much that can be added to what was said before. Yes, the best uncle. Remember, took us to fun fair, had wonderful, wonderful times with him, talking about back in the 60s, 70s. He's the, the uncle, the one that, the best uncle, the one that, that made it all the fun. He was the person. I did prepare a few words, but late at the hour, in honor of the hour, in respect of the situation, and in respect of my uncle Michal, what he would want me to do, I'll just say L'chaim, and the Shem soll haben an Aliyah, und sie sein ein guter Bettler für uns alle. L'chaim.
Yeshikayach, Rabbi Duchman. I heard an antidote during Shiva. We heard a story. One of my father's close friends, somebody that would visit him very often and bring over some cognac from time to time, and for bring a little from Moshe Barash, so sagen gesund. He shared with us that when he was a boy, like a teenager, he came with his father shopping at Raskin's, and it was Erev Pesach, and they were buying chrein. And he went to choose the chrein on the shelf, and he only saw clean chrein. But he learned in yeshiva that you have to have nicht gewaschen a chrein. So he's telling his father, I can't find the chrein, I can't find the chrein. And my father overheard the conversation, and he tells him, Je gewaschen, nicht gewaschen. Moishele, der Iker is, as du allein soll nicht sein kein chrein. Our next speaker is going to join us from the video screen. He's a dear friend, a sweet friend of my father, somebody who's davened with him in shul, knew him from the store. I would like to now pay attention to the screens for Mayor Rhodes from Eretz HaKodesh.
I know him from the store. We came to Crown Heights 1975, way before you guys were born. And there was a store, Raskin's fruit store.
Yes.
And so we used to shop there. And there was this big guy that was there, big handsome Russian, Michal. And but we didn't become friends in the beginning. I mean, I knew who he was, but we didn't really connect until about maybe 30 years ago. And at that time, there were very few Bali Tshuva. There were, people, it wasn't like today, there was a movement. Today, there was a few guys, that crazy guys who came in from different parts of the world, and they connected to the Rebbe, and they connected to the Hasidim, and either the Hasidim took you in or they didn't. There were people who lived in Crown Heights, they never knew who from what. But there were a few of us got very lucky. It was the best thing ever happened to me. We had a Michal, we started davening in the same shul. I used to daven in free. First of all, once we made the connection, how make the connection with the Raskins. So my wife and I were Shloshim to Russia before the fall of communism. Went 3 times. We became friends. We just liked each other. And we started, we find somebody and they're similar. And we hit on each other. That's what always been. When you're with a friend, when you meet somebody, it could be many years after you were born, but you always knew that you always would have been friends. And we had the same love. We loved the Rebbe, and he loved Lubavitch, and he was Russian, and we went to Russia, Shluchim to Russia. And so we had a lot to connect to. I understood where he came from. A bit. I understood Leningrad. And he came from Leningrad. And he was Michal was open. He was an open head. He liked to party, he liked to eat, he liked to drink. He loved people. And we shared that. And then we davened in the same shul. So we were friends from the shul. And then the store. I used to go into the store all the time and hang out with him in the store. And like that. He was a great soul. He was a great soul. They don't come around like this. They don't make these people anymore. Yes. They're gone. Finished. Sure. Because they grew in a different time, see. He lost his father when he was a baby. And he grew in the hunger in Leningrad, during the war, and came to America with nothing. His father was killed in the war, and he used to speak often of his father, Aaron. That was his father, big handsome guy. And he came with his brothers. He told me the story about his beard and went into the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said to him something that just absolutely blew his mind. And maybe I can share that story with you, because it's very moving. He said the last time he saw his father was going into the front, to the war, into the army. Big, handsome guy, was a shochet. And he took Michal, who was a baby, to the window. He sat him on the window ledge. And they were very close. And he said to him like this. He said to Michal, I want you to wear a beard. I want you to have a beard when you grow. He was a little kid. And he made a motion with his hand, Michal, like this. He said, he took Michal's hand, he said like this. I want you to get this. The last time he saw his father. He said like this. And he took Michal's hand and he stroked his father's beard with his hand, like this, with the back of his hand, right? And it always stuck in his mind. He shaved, he was more of a modern guy, came to America. And the Rebbe would not marry anybody who didn't have a beard. So he went to the Rebbe, and he asked the Rebbe that he should ask that he would marry him. And the Rebbe looked at him, he said he would marry them. He would marry Michal on the condition that he grew a beard and he made the same exact motion that his father made. He said, just like this. And Michal said it just blew his mind. Exactly the same way that his father said to him before, like this. Whoever made the same motion, just like this. And that's the story. And that's the story of Raskin.
Wow.
Yeah, very powerful. It was great. They don't make Jews like this anymore. No, they're gone. The Russia made them. The Times made them. First, he was a handsome, big, handsome guy, and full of life. And he was real. You know, he was a real person. A dear friend. We spoke on the phone. We used to talk often on the telephone. He would call me, I would call him. We liked the same thing. We liked to drink, we liked to eat, we loved Jews, he liked Jewish people. He had a great sense of humor. They don't make people like this anymore. Michal, he liked to eat, you know. And when he came, the last time I saw him here, went out for lunch. What did he want to eat? Fish and chips. That was his big thing, fish and chips. Went to a few places to eat fish and chips. Big order of fish and chips. Traveled around a little bit. What do you want to do next? He said, let's go have some more fish and chips. So we went to another place. Had another big order of fish and a big order of chips. You lose a friend. You lose a dear friend. Take a piece of you into the grave. You go into the grave. When you lose a friend, you take a piece with you. Because, you know, a dear friend understands you. You communicate, you understand each other. And that's gone, so who you talk to?
Thank you very much, Mayor Rhodes, and thank you to Swish Media again for providing us with that. There's going to be one more video where my father is going to address all of us, and then we are going to have the Siyum, and we thank everybody again for learning the Mishnayos and being part of this. So now pay attention to the screen.
Du wil zeggen dat secret? Wil dat niet zo hard te zeggen, niet als ik zo. Niet staan dat de groepen die wil niet gewoon grenzen dan met Gogem. Die staan in de groep aan de Rebbe staan tegen hier, wie zo ze betracht. Maar met geld zijn we dat trachten, wie tracht Rebbe. Die kinderen moeten bij mij zijn, weet ze. Please take care of them, weil ich weiß, wie they können. Als de Rebbe zo daar zonder helpen, dat die kinderen dan alle zijn, ehrlich gegeven. That's all. Und als zij das geworden. Und ich habe getracht und geguckt davor, wie umgegangen sie dann. Bei mir alles, das Letzte soll sein, alright? Ich glaube, der Rebbe hat mir gut verstanden.
All those brachas should be mekuyim by all of us. Achar Nachar and Chaviv, we'll now do the Siyum. The Friedrich Rebbe writes, If gebarne Kinder is menit kein balbchira, but by the in-laws is another story. I'd like to ask my brother-in-law, Rabbi Srili Edelman, Chasani Kibnoi to come do a siyum on the Mishnayos. And not only was his sons-in-law special, but my father said many times how he's lucky that he has his in-laws, sons-in-laws and daughters-in-laws, and Rabbi Edelman.
It's a hard act to follow all the things that we've heard tonight. In my shul, I like to start with a joke. So the hour is late, I will be brief. That's the joke. So we make a siyum. We make a siyum at a yahrzeit, we make a siyum at a Shloshim. It's Parshas Yisroi. Yisroi speaks about the Shver. The Shver comes and it's everything is Hashgacha Pratis. When the Shver would come, there would always be comments, and they were good comments. He came to us in Springfield and he said, the shul is great, the Kiddush, you need a cholent. And from that day on, there was a cholent. He said, people will stay, people will fabring, it will make a difference. He came to Florida, he saw things, you have to make a Kiddush. It was too difficult, just logistically not. But he would stand there and speak with everybody and anybody, men, women, children. And when everybody heard what had happened, everybody knew and had a connection to Zayda, to the Shver. It was something that was very special. So Baruch Hashem, the Olam learned Mishnayos once and twice, the whole Shisha Siddur Mishnah. The last Masechta is Uktzin. Uktzin is an interesting Masechta, and we'll read the last Mishnah. Omer Zokter Helika Mishnah Omer Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Osir HaKadosh Baruch Hu Lahanchil Chol Tzadik V'Tzadik Sholosh Meis V'Asara Elomes. That the Eibishter is going to give each and every tzaddik, twice, tzaddik v'tzadik, 310 worlds. Shenemar lahanchil oyev hayesh v'etzesem amalei. That I will give over, my legacy will be to those who love me. Yesh, which is also Shin Yud, 310. V'etzesem amalei, and I will fill their treasures. Omer Reb Shimon ben Chalafta, Laimotza HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kleimachzik Bracha El HaShalom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could not find anything which will contain blessings of peace, the blessings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What could contain it? It is only shalom, it's only peace. Shenemar, Hashem oiz le'amo yitein, Hashem yivarech esami b'shalom. That Hashem will give his nation strength, and he will bless them with peace. So there are questions that are asked. There's a Fabrengen Yutes Kislev, Tavshin Yutes. The Rebbe made a siyum and he spoke about this Mishnah. And he asked many questions. Why does it say L'chol Tzadik V'Tzadik? For each and every Tzadik. L'chol Tzadik, why twice? Shai Olam is 310 worlds. What's 310? What does the number 310 represent? And then the format of the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Loi Motza HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ella. Why did not? And then in the positive. So the Rebbe explains, in order to get a bracha, you have to have a kli. You have to have a medium by which to be able to receive them. How do we have this bracha to have on one side from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and then it has to come into this world? The Eibishter is ruchnius. God's blessings are something spiritual. How do we get it to the Gashmias? And in the words of the Rebbe, he said, the kli vert ois kli. We're going to have the bracha from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's going to be a system overload. We won't be able to contain it. How do we have that? So therefore, at first glance, we'll say, how could you have a bracha? So the Mishnah says, Loi. You're going to say, Loi motza HaKadosh Baruch Hu klei machzik bracha. How could we have it? Therefore, the Rebbe says, that's why the Mishnah continues, Ella hashalom. Because shalom, peace, is when you have two things that are problematic. Two things that work together, you don't need to have peace. It is peace. How do you create peace when there's diversity, when things are not quite together? then you can have the peace. To have the Gashmi and Gashmias and the Ruchnias together, that's where peace can come. And the Rebbe says, how is that? That's by davening. When you'll daven with truth, that's how you're going to have peace. And this is the connection, says the Rebbe, to beginning of Shas. The first Shas speaks about davening. When do you begin reading Shema, which is the beginning of davening? So the beginning of Shas speaks about davening, and the end of Shas speaks about bringing peace. And the Rebbe says, Be'arvin means at night. At night when the world is dark and things are not so good. When things are wonderful, to be at peace with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's great, and everything is wonderful. When things are not so good, that's when it gets more difficult. And as the Rebbe there says there, a phenomenal comment. He says when the Eibusher gives a bracha, so there's a bracha for each and every person. Ish kibrachase beirach eisam. We get the brachas that we deserve, the brachas that we need. But in davening we say, Yiratzain milfonecha. Means that the davening should create within HaKadosh Baruch Hu a new level of bracha, a new level of commitment in us, that the Eibusher should be able to give us more. So it's interesting, this last Masechta, this last Mishnah here really doesn't belong. But Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the Rebbe wanted that the Shas should end on a high note, on bracha, on shalom. But the Masechta itself talks about uktzin. Uktzin means stems. And it's an interesting Masechta. It speaks about volume of fruit. You have fruit, and you have the stem of the fruit. You have the klipa, you have the shell of the fruit. You have peels on the fruit. Interesting. The Shver was a fruit man. And Uktzin speaks about fruit. How do you look at fruit? Do you look at the fruit itself? Do you look at the shell? Do you look what you eat? Or do you look at the stem? So there's a Gemara in Chulin. Chulin the daf Tzadik Beis. Tzadik Beis is 92. The Shver was 92. And in Chulin daf Tzadik Beis, Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, the Gemara says, Umazu, our people, Kigefen nimshala. We're compared to grapes. We're compared to fruit. Zemarish sheba elu balabatim. The zemarish, the stems, this refers to the balabatim. Ashkoilos, the clusters, this refers to the Talmidei Chachamim. And this is what Rabbeinu HaKadosh wanted to end all of the Mishnayos with. That you should know it's all one. There's no difference between the shell, there's no difference between the stem and the fruit itself. Because when you're measuring volume, teaches the Mishnah, now there the volume actually could be plus or minus. If you measure more volume, then the fruit could actually be makabel tumah. If it's less, it's not. But the message is that it's all one and it's all the same. You have the fruit, you count it as the fruit, not just the fruit itself, you count the shell, you count the stem, you count the leaves, everything is there together. And the stems, interestingly enough, are called yodois. They're called hands. And again, the shver, the hand that went. I remember the first time he shook my hand, we were about to write in, myself and Gutel, before we're going to be married, engaged. And he shook my hand, and I said, I'll take care of her, don't worry, I'll treat her very, very nice. He wanted to make the point, and Baruch Hashem, the point was well taken. And the Gemara has a cute line. Il mole alya le miskame iskalya. If not for the leaves, you wouldn't have the fruit. Because in fact, they are one and one in the same. And that's why the Mishnah says, I'll call tzaddik v'tzaddik. Why does it say the word tzaddik twice? Because you have different kinds of tzaddikim. You have the tzaddikim are the ones who do laim de Torah. Then you have the Goimlei Chasadim, those who do chesed the entire life, and both are tzaddikim. The chol tzaddik v'tzaddik. And perhaps that's why it says Shai Olam is 310. Because each one of the tzaddikim represent 310. Both of them together is 620. 620 is Taryag mitzvahs and the Sheva mitzvahs derabanan. So both of them together create tzaddik v'tzaddik. When we finish the Mishnayos, we say a Hadran. What's the Hadran? Hadran is, we'll read it soon in a moment, which says we're going to return to you. We learned one Masechta, and we're going to continue learning. So if we look at the words, it starts with the word Hadran Aloch, which means we shall return to you. And to Zayda, to the Shver, we say, we shall return to you, as we are going to be examples of your life. Hadran Alon means you shall return to us, because your light and inspiration will shine on us each and every day. And then it continues, Le'nishani minach, le'sishani minach. We will not forget you, and you will not forget us. Le'ba'alma hadain, le'ba'alma da'asi. Not in this world and not in the world to come. You are in the place today, Shver, in the place where tzaddikim are sitting, v'atreseim b'rashehem, and you will continue to be a Meilitz Yosher. The Shver taught us that you have to look and accept each and every person, as was mentioned many times. Like the fruit, when Zayda looked at fruit, there was no such thing as a bad apple. There was no, we know what that means. Every apple was good. Some apples were better than others, but they were all good and they were all useful. And chas v'shalom, to throw out a piece of fruit, to throw out a piece of food. And he would remind us the times when he was a kid, and he would sometimes look at a piece of herring. Somebody mentioned about the herring. He would say the herring, when he looked at the herring, he remembered when he was a kid in Leningrad, and he found a little scrap of herring. And he went into the closet and said, Yishmochkid after herring, because this was something that he didn't have, and he had a little piece of food. And he reminded everyone, have respect for the food. Don't throw anything away. There was a certain charm, an engaging part of his personality, that he saw things in a special way. He used to say, a Welt mit Weltlach. You look around, there's a world, and within the world there's another orbit of another worlds, and people have to embrace each other and to do some things that bring people together. If I could use one word to describe him, it's authenticity. He was authentic, not just authentic, but authenticity. If you'd Google it, you would see his picture. This was a man who, there was no questions what he thought, no questions what he said, what he meant. He was there just by virtue of who he was. But there was another side of him that I really didn't know until my son Ari was born. We were living in Springfield, and obviously they came for the bris. And the night before the bris, he tells me, Sada mikveh. Yeah, okay, we have to gain morgen in the free. In the mikveh, we have to go in the morning to the mikveh. So I told him in Springfield, the mikveh is a women's mikveh, and if we're lucky, we get to use it Friday morning. So he said, no, we have to have a mikveh. So I went and I arranged it. We talk at a mikveh in the morning. And he told me why. He said, Meile uns, we are what we are. Aber was darf der Jingle leiden? I guess he didn't get it. He said, us, we are what we are. But why should this child have to suffer because we hadn't been in the mikveh? It wasn't put on, it wasn't a show. It was something that was serious. And then sometime later, I heard a story from a cousin. Yud Aleph Nisan Toshin Membeis, 1982, the Rebbe gave out Tanyas. So if you remember, there was a whole balagan in 770, and the Rebbe said everybody should leave, and then come back in. Like mentioned, you'll be able to get the Tanya, and it's going to be in an orderly fashion. So this cousin was outside, and he sees the Shver sitting and crying. And he said, Michal, was weinst du? Why are you crying? He says, the Rebbe is giving out Tanyas, and I wasn't in the mikveh today. And in 1982, that time of night, there was no mikveh open. So he told him, he says, some people will go up there without going to the mikveh first. And he says, Ich zum Rebbe on a mikveh will ich nicht gehen. And he didn't. Just, you think about what a person is, it's just remarkable. And I don't know if everybody else remembers, but I remember when the Shver put on a kapota. Put on a kapota was, he turned 70 years old. It was Shalom's bar mitzvah, Moshe's bar mitzvah, and he decided he was going to wear a kapota. Now, I speak about authenticity. He didn't do it for anybody else. He did it because he felt this was the right thing to do. And I remember saying then, you know what? This man is for real. Sometimes we get to a certain stage in our life and we're very happy what we did in the past and we're just good and we're going to go forward. We're going to be on automatic pilot. The Shver was not like that. Each day was worth living and he made it worth living and he found what to do and he found where to help and he had ideas and he had thoughts. His mind was constantly working. But it wasn't just for others, it was for himself as well. And then there was one time where the Rebbe said to have mashpiyim. Mashpiyah. So I thought, great idea. The Rebbe is very busy. So he wants to delegate a little bit of authority, a little bit like Yisro in the Parsha. You know what? Let's do it. The Shver was shaken to the core. And I didn't get him. What's wrong? He says, do you realize what the Rebbe is doing? Do you realize what's happening? Do you realize he's planning for the future? Then he saw it and he felt it. And it was just the way it shook him. He got it. He got it because that was authenticity. He saw it and he felt it and it was a part of him. So that's uktzin. Uktzin is having a connection to everybody and to anything, having a connection to davening. The last few years when he davened at home, he would be sitting at the dining room table and he would daven for hours. Hours and hours every day he would daven. The shul was moved into his house. He was thrilled. He had his own Sefer Torah and they davened. It was a place of tefillah. There's a vart from Rabbi Kasia Lepler. He used to say that sometimes when he tried to daven, sometimes he was in the moment and sometimes he was not in the moment. And he said, Chosid Prishol. The Chosid has arrived when he was able to daven. When it was difficult, he said, Chosid Ochok. Said, the Chosid's gone. The Chosid's gone. I would say to the Shver, Chosid Prishol. The Chosid is here. He has arrived and he is here. Yes, he may physically not be here, but we know for Chassidim that doesn't make a difference which floor you're on, upstairs or downstairs, he is here. And to say Chosid Itzhak, that the Chosid has left, he has not left, and he's here and he will always continue to be here. There's an expression, Ish ha'eshkolos, a great person. It means a person who's fruitful, a person who is a cluster of fruit. And throughout his life, we were fortunate enough to be able to have the physical fruit from his store, to be his fruit, to give him fruit. And he was the one who took care of all of us. And just with a bracha before we make the actual hadran, that we were very, very lucky. And I know people have been reading things. I'll read something from my daughter-in-law, Shalamis. And she wrote, how lucky we are to have had someone that makes saying goodbye so hard. There are times like this where we try and figure out words, but it's not just about words, it's about authenticity, it's about a feeling. And at the end of the day, like we just saw in the video, if we do what the Eibishter wants, if we do what the Rebbe wants, we will continue on his legacy. And Baruch Hashem, he was ready to have a Yechiel Michal. There should be many more Ken Yirbu Be Yisrael, not just in the name, but what he stood for, and to continue on for generations to come. And a bracha to Safta, to my dear mother-in-law, and to the entire family. We should continue on living his legacy. And yes, he was demanding. And for all of those who remember the 24/7 being together with him in the hospital and the times we were there in. It wasn't easy going to Lakewood, but people did it out of love, and people did it out of concern, because you knew he did this for his mother, he did this for his family, and he lived by example. It was authentic, it was real, and the Eibusha should help that we should be as real and authentic as he was, doing the things for the right time and in the right place, until we'll be together with him. B'meira b'yameinu, amen. Hadran lach shisa sidi mishra, hadran lach daitan lach shisa sidi mishra, daitan alon le nishne minach shisa sidi mishra, le sisne minach le ba'alma dem le ba'alma da'asi. Hadran lach shisa sidi mishra, hadran alon daitan lach shisa sidi mishra, daitan alon le nishne minach shisa sidi mishra, le sisne minon le ba'alma dem le ba'alma da'asi. Hadran lach shisa sidi mishra, hadran alon daitan alon shisa sidi mishra, daitan alon le nishne minach shisa sidi mishra, le sisne minon le ba'alma dem le ba'alma da'asi. Herav narin elenus libres rasko befino fias amcha beisrael v'niya kulanu anachnu v'tzetzeinu v'tzetze amcha beisrael kulanu yedi shmecha v'leim des rasko l'shma me'evit hachmeni mitzvusach yileilam hili hili bisami chukach laman le'evaish ki lo'elam esha pikudach givamchi yisani baruch atah adonai lamdeni chukacha amen 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 selavod moidim anachnu lefanecha ne'elein v'le'aveseinu shesamtach l'keinu yeshe beis hamedrash Lemi Yeshve Kronis. Shonu Mashkim, Hey Mashkim, On Mashkim, Devitai, Hey Mashkim, Lidvarim Betelim, Onu Mamelim, Hey Mamelim, Onu Melim, Kalmi Sachar, Hey Melim, Benim, Kalmi Sachar, Onu Ratzim, Hey Ratzim, Onu Ratzim, Lechai, Elam Above, Hey Ratzim, Levershachas, Shenemar, Vater, Lehim, Teridim, Levershachas, Anchi, Dam, Mimmer, Liachso, Yemeim, Vani Eftach Bach. Yiratzim, Lefanach, Adonai Lehai, Kishem, Shazatani, Kulonu, Lesayim, Shisha Sede, Mishnah, Kain, Tazreinu lehaskal svarim achemu lesaimim lilmaid ulalamed lishmar velasis ulakayim es kol divrei salmot orasecha be'ava uschus kalatanoim v'tamid chachama nisgarim b'shisha sidrei hamishna tamud li ulazarish le'tomash atayim pim be'zari v'zari at elim v'skayim bi b'salechtcha tancha isa b'shachcha tishmar alecha v'akitzaysa hi tisichecha giviyir b'yamecha v'yasiv l'cha shnei schayim erich yami b'minam b'smeila esha v'choved adinoi oiz la'ama yitain Adonai Yavarech es Amai Bashalem. No, it's a Kaddish. Men Yehi Shmei Rabbam Avarach Liolam Lam Yemai Yizbarech. Amen. 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 Amen.
Just 1 minute. Before you leave, first of all, thank you very much for coming. We really appreciate it. We'd like to ask our oldest brother, it's Kabid Es Avicha Vesimecha, our brother Arik, Nutz Tchilasan V'Sefen V'Sefen Mitchilasan. So everybody please give us a minute of your attention. I'd like to ask my brother Arik to please come up, and again, thank you. Arik?
Thank you all for joining us tonight, here and throughout the globe. Many things were said tonight. One thing was not mentioned today. Numbers. Numbers don't lie. And since my father was so authentic, something very unique. Tonight is a Shloshim. What is it? In Pirkei Avos it says that Shloshim is lekoyach. Everyone is celebrating my father's great might, great power, great strength, great force. And the Shloshim is a time to celebrate that great force. Shalom mentioned in the early part of this evening the Hayom Yom of my father's birth, where it speaks about, the Rebbe speaks the Torah from the Alter Rebbe. Shema Yisrael Ayid der Hert Hashem Elokeinu dat koicheinu v'chayeseinu v'havai echad. It's all about koicheinu, our strength. The last day of his life, Chav Beis Tevetz, the Hayom Yom is Hayom Yom, which the Rebbe Rashab said by a Fabrengen in Tov Reish Samach. So and he speaks about how a Jew, parents have to, just like putting on tefillin every day is a mitzvah d'oraisa, so too to think every single day for 30 minutes. And in what way are you supposed to think how to educate your kids? With your strength and even more than your strength. So that is the spiritual side. We're not talking about the physical strength of my father, but we're speaking about his life. It began with Koicheinu v'chayesenu, and in this Hayom Yom, the Rebbe speaks about that you have to educate the kids to go in the right path. We got many messages, WhatsApps, how people wrote to us. What your father left with us was life lessons. Wherever life lessons is educating whoever you meet, they should go in the right way. And in this sikha, the Rebbe doesn't say deine Kinder, it says Kinder. Kinder could be your kids, Kinder is anybody you meet. Something very interesting is that Chaim Ben Zion Pearson mentioned to me that this Hayom Yom, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote in a letter to Chaim Ben Zion Raskin, he wrote to him this Hayom Yom, and this Hayom Yom is in Chav Beis Teves. My father was the oldest Urenikol of Chaim Ben Zion Raskin. So even though we find that all his life he celebrated Chen and Lane, but Chav Beis Teves, the Hayom Yom, is a letter to Chaim Ben Zion Raskin, and he's always remembered as Raskin. So these are little notes that we speak about the physical strength, but over here, it's not physical strength is not enough. It has to be even greater than your physical strength. If I could just share one more tidbit about Stav Yapitu, Upiantnitsu, I was thinking about something very incredible happened here. The Rebbe turned to my father to translate the song. Why he turned to him? Only the Rebbe knows. But if you look in the history, when my father was born, Yud Beis Cheshvan, Tofresh Tzadik, Yud Beis Cheshvan was Friday. The whole song of Stav Yapitu Piatnitzu is about singing, drinking on Friday. But remember, there comes Cheshvan Tzedek, and then it's wonderful. You were born today, Friday, you're going to live a life, but at the end of the day, remember there is somebody you have to give a Cheshvan Tzedek. And last but not least, to remember this evening, we all know that my father's last day in this world, he was Shabbos, full last day, he passed Sunday morning, and he was 92. The address of this building is 792. Numbers connected to him. Why is it so incredible? Because the Shir Shel Yom, what we say, the Shir Shel Yom, what's the Mizmor Shir Shel Yom HaShabbos is also 92. So 792, when it comes to Shabbos, what's the Shir Shel Yom? 792. Everyone here mentioned almost everyone, how he always praised God. He always praised. Tov L'Heides L'Hashem. So I was thinking about Mizmor Shir L'Yom HaShabbos 92. Tov L'Heides L'Hashem L'Hagid. Then the next pasuk, L'Hagid Ba'Boker Chazdecha. To thank God for your Chazdecha, for your kindness. Chazdecha is Begimatya 92. And when is the Hagid Ba'Boker Chazdecha? Even there was Be'emnoscha Ba'Leilos. So definitely, even more so. So this is the 792 that we are here today, and we all should have long lives and all remember our lessons. My dear mother should have a long, happy life, and we should make her proud. And again, Mashiach now. Thanks.
Ay da dam, ay na da yam, ayam, 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 ay na 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 na, ay na 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 na, ayam, ayam, ayam. Ahayam, na 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 na, na 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 yam. Tiridai na dai na dai na dai, ya na dam. Hi na dai na dai na dai, ya. Hi na dam. Hi na ya. Hayin Adam, Hayin Ayin Ayam, Ayin Adam, Ayam, Ayinam, Hayin Ananayam, Hayin Ananayam, Ayam, ayam, ayinam, ayinadaya, ayinadaya, ayam.